Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. You can also find my work at NBC Sharks on Twitter, Sheng_Peng, and Blue Sky, Sheng Peng.
And I'm Keegan McNally. You can find me on Twitter at @half_hockey, at my website, half-wallhockey.com, or at San Jose Hockey Now. We have a very exciting show this week, but before we get to that, Sheng's got a quick word for our sponsors.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Sports Shots, and thank you for sponsoring us. And Sports Shots photography by Dean Tate. You see all his work all over San Jose Hockey Now. He just had an incredible shot of Macklin Celebrini right after Macklin shot the puck over the glass in the Vancouver game, stick over his head, looking very Charlie Brown, good grief face. Obviously not a great moment for the Sharks, but a terrific picture and a testament to Dean's talent. So again, want to thank Dean for sponsoring the show. Also, too, want to thank our other sponsors, Kathy's Power Skating and Extra Hour Training.
I love it. We have a very exciting show. Like I said, we're going to cover a few things as we head into the a bit of a reprieve from Sharks hockey. We sometimes need a break from Sharks hockey in the past couple of years. We're heading into the Four Nations break for the next 2 weeks. The Sharks will be off as we get to watch some of the best players in the world play against each other, and hopefully what will be a very entertaining tournament and not just kind of pond hockey-ish, which can happen. So before we get there, we wanted to have a small bit of state of the Sharks, if you will, a look at some of the recent losses and how the team has been playing. We're going to talk just about a few different players who have been called up and sent down recently. We're going to speak about some possible trade deadline targets or candidates for the Sharks, like who might be on their way out from the Sharks, minus Granlund, of course, after last week's big trade. And then finally, and Cody Ceci as well. Finally, we have a brief prospect spotlight for Egor Chernishov, which I've been watching a lot of lately.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear Keegan's take on Egor Chernishov. Chernishov is off to a torrid start with Saginaw. So, yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Also, too, I forgot to mention that we are also, speaking of talking about sponsors earlier, we're also looking for sponsors, too. So if you're interested, you can email me at sjhockeynow@gmail.com. And finally, we have a really exciting guest, too, this week. We have Colby Cohen of Daily Faceoff. Also ESPN's college hockey coverage, and we had Colby on over the summer, and he was the most he was hyping up Macklin, Celebrini, and Will Smith too, more than maybe any other guest that we've had, and he's been proven completely right about Macklin. Will Smith still a work in progress, but as we've seen with Will the last couple of weeks, he's definitely progressing. And so it's exciting to see Will Smith be doing that too. But we brought on Colby mainly to talk about the Calder Trophy race, which has become kind of a 3-horse race between Celebrini, Lane Hutson, and Dustin Wolf. A couple weeks ago, Colby actually had Lane Hutson ahead of Macklin Celebrini. And so we'll kind of see what he thinks about that now and talk about Lane Hutson's game, because Lane was just here in San Jose with Montreal. So yeah, really looking forward to talking with Colby about that. Also, too, we talk about Will Smith too. And I want to remind you guys too that Colby Cohen, we also talk about Connor Bedard. And that's another exciting part of the conversation. And I want to remind everybody that Colby was, not to give away everything in this interview, it's an outstanding one, but Colby was very, very early on talking about Bedard in a very real way. I know right now it's sort of an easy thing to rip on Bedard and rip on his kind of the lack of completeness in his game. And Colby was kind of pointing that out earlier in the summer, if you listen back to that interview. So we talk a bit more about Bedard versus Celebrini. So I want to remind everybody that Colby is no Johnny come lately on the Bedard versus Celebrini bandwagon.
Yeah, and he's so far been kind of proven correct, and he even mentioned that he prefers Celebrini's game and the way that he impacts the ice on both ends. So that's a great interview. It's always lovely to have him on. He brings a lot of energy, and especially towards college hockey prospects, and loves Macklin Celebrini and Lane Hutson, man. He really does. So great to have him on. We'll hopefully be able to see him after the draft lottery or after the Calder Trophy has been announced for Macklin Celebrini. Knock on wood. But before we get to the interview, which again is fantastic, let's talk a little bit about where the Sharks are after a 8-3 blowout loss against Dallas. Um, I will say before we get to that, I did think they played well in Vancouver, and I know
Mhm.
you feel the same way, that they had some okay games there. And then what happened with Dallas?
Yeah, what happened? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, they had actually a pretty good week. They played well against Montreal and Vancouver.
Yep.
I think though that I'm gonna preface all of this that I think we're gonna see a few more of these blowouts the rest of the season. And I think part of it is because when you compare a Dallas to a Vancouver and Montreal, even though Dallas is missing their number one defenseman and Kunin, they're so loaded. They have so much depth. They also play the right way, top to bottom. They are a great team. Vancouver and Montreal are not,
Mhm.
and those teams are okay to good. And of course, Vancouver was also missing Quinn Hughes too, so that's important to remember also for them. And they're not as deep as Dallas, so they can't weather the loss of a number one defenseman like Dallas can. But anyway, the reason why I kind of mentioned that we're in for a lot of pain,
Mhm.
or you're in for a lot of pain, Sharks fan, but me too. I got to watch all this too.
It's true.
Is obviously the Sharks have lost significant depth, or they're kind of high for the Sharks, their top end players in Granlund and CC. I think that's one big part of it, obviously. The other part of it too is that the goaltending at
Mhm.
the moment is not, the goaltending. I'm not going to put too much, how do you say it?
Sure.
I'm not going to put so much for Georgiev and for Vanecek to shoulder because
Yeah.
they are not getting any help. They didn't get a lot of help in that Dallas game. Georgiev didn't get much help in that Florida game, which kind of the Vancouver and Montreal games were booked in by a Seattle embarrassment and this Dallas embarrassment, and also too there was a Florida embarrassment just a couple of weeks ago there too. And so I think you gotta kind of,
Yeah.
how do you say it? You've got to be prepared for a lot of pain.
You kind of
The rest of the
expect
season,
the
I guess, is a way to put it. And I
yeah.
think a good way to express the Florida games is to look at the two different Florida games this year. And earlier in the season, the Sharks were run out of the building by a professional contending AHL team in Florida. The Panthers had, I think, 54 shots on the Sharks. The Sharks had nothing in that game. But of
Yep.
course, that score was 3-1 because you had a guy, Mackenzie Blackwood, who was able to rise above his occasion, rise above his situation in San Jose, and be incredible on some nights and keep the team in games that they had no business being in, or win them games that were kind of toss-ups, like maybe like the Vancouver or Montreal games this past week, maybe.
Mhm.
And Sharks don't have that, and they have a potential guy in Askarov, but this seems like they're going to keep him down there until maybe the trade deadline. And right now, it's again not to put all of it on Vanecek and Georgiev. They've been good goalies before in the recent past. I think they can be good goalies again in the right situation, but obviously at this moment, though, they have not been great goalies for the Sharks. They haven't really been able to rise above the situation on a regular basis, like Blackwood was able to, like Askarov has the potential to. And so you're going to get a lot more of this, along with you lost Granlund, you lost CC, you lost arguably your best player, you lost your number two defenseman in CC. So it's going to get a bit uglier here, I would say. And it's going to make the rest of the season is going to be a grind, I think, even though, again, I think the Sharks play a better brand of hockey, and there are stats to prove it too. I know the points, they are just 2 points ahead of last year,
Yep.
but I pointed a lot about the goal differential. I've spoken a lot about that. And I think we took a quick look before, and we're not accounting for the shootout losses for it. So,
Mhm.
but I think it was like at minus 68 right now. And at last year at this time, 57 games in, it was at a minus 102. But those numbers are going to get closer and closer, because I think about a month ago, the Sharks had a goal differential that was maybe better than Chicago's. So
Yeah,
a month ago, this was looking a lot better. It's going to get worse and worse, I think. But there
sure.
are things that I see in terms of just the puck possession and micro stats I've seen that I got to put out a story about it. But micro stats in terms of chances given up, that it's not quite as bad as last year. There's some progress, but a lot of it's going to be that progress is going to be dampened though by what is to come, which is these last 25 games. And when you see the Sharks, I don't know the exact bar for all this. When the Sharks go up against a Florida and a Dallas, I think that it's fair to expect them to get run out of the building. And they were run out of the building in like I said, in Florida, when things were still kind of looking more up for the Sharks.
Yep.
But I think games like, kind of coming to my ending point here, like games like against Vancouver, Montreal, that Seattle game that they shouldn't have no-showed like that. Those are games against beatable opponents. They are better than the Sharks, all those teams, but they aren't. The gap between the Sharks and the Kraken isn't like the gap between the Sharks and the Stars.
Yeah.
And so those are games that should be closer, should be more competitive. And of course, you still want them to show up for the games against your Vegas, your Florida, your Dallases, but those games are going to be really, really tough for the rest of the season. But anyway, so the bar isn't much here, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm saying, and be prepared for pain. But I wanted to look kind of into the subtlety of it, look into the weeds and kind of the the difference though of, again, the goaltending really does matter. I think Blackwood papered over a lot this
Oh yeah.
season and last season. Askarov got off to a quick start and he kind of slowed down, but he was papering over a bit there too. And without those two there, unless Vanecek or Georgiev can kind of turn it around right after the Four Nations break, it's gonna be ugly.
A quick note about the goaltending.
Mm-hmm.
So Georgiev specifically, because he's gotten more of the starts since the Blackwood trade,
Sure.
just by both Vanecek being injured and Askarov being pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
His numbers have looked really, really, I'll say, terrible. And I don't want to
Sure.
mean like he's like you said, he's been a good goalie in the past, but it just has not worked out. He says 2 wins and 14 starts, which is not great, first of all. And then he has just 4 games of those 14 starts where he was above a 900 save percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's never given up less than 2 goals in a game for the Sharks since he's been here. So he at least gives up 2 goals, most times more. That's not good. It's hard to win
That's
any
not
hockey
good.
game, any hockey game when you spot your team every single night 2 goals. Like, it doesn't matter if you're out there, you're gonna give up 2 goals, and it's hard to win because your offense has to respond in a way that makes them score 3, and the Sharks' offense is not deep enough or talented enough to do that almost every night. And I'm explaining the very basics of how you lose hockey games, but that's how you lose hockey games, and it's unfortunate. I think it will be a much different Sharks team in many ways after the summer, but one of the definite ways that needs to improve is goaltending. And I bet they not just Askarov being called up as one of our 2 goalies for next year, but I bet they go after a kind of a 1A, 1B goalie that has been kind of proven in the league to be at least a capable backup for now.
Well,
Somebody
they'll
like
need
a Jake
somebody.
Allen.
Yeah, somebody that can weather a lot of work.
Yes.
To Georgiev's credit, if you look really hard at what he's done with the Sharks, the first 5 games were pretty rough. I think he did win his first game, but they were pretty rough. He did have a stretch there. He had 5 games that he strung together that were very good, actually. They was on the road trip, the Islanders. He was keeping actually the Sharks in games. They played a game against Vegas at home, I think, that he was quite good in. And so it looked like he was kind of turning it around, but then the last couple kind of have reverted back to At least the results have kind of been the same. So I want to kind of mention that just so we can. It's not all on Georgiev. Vanecek also too. Vanecek played well against Vancouver, his first game back from his scary face injury, fractured cheek in mid-December. But then
he looked excellent.
The Dallas game, he didn't get any help, but he also didn't help them much either. Too, a couple goals that he would like to have back there. I think.
Absolutely.
So I think that's in fairness. This isn't just a dumping on Georgiev or whatever. This is a really hard situation for any goalie, really, and a really really hard situation. And I think we just kind of underrated how much Blackwood sort of papered over a lot of this stuff and made him more respectable than it should have been. Blackwood wasn't there last year. Sharks are the worst team in salary cap history, and they were already one of the worst teams in league history, but maybe they would have been the very worst team. I don't know.
Yeah. And quick shout out for Colorado's like pro scouting staff, right? Because there's a risk that they've taken, right? They've taken a risk to pick up Blackwood, then signing him within like 2 weeks. And that seems to be working out great. He fits in super well there and has been playing very well. And then same thing, they traded Rantanen and got Necas, and Necas fits like a glove as well. So I don't know. Shout out to Colorado, because it feels like you Sharks fans, we saw Blackwood standing on his head most nights and keeping a really bad Sharks team in games. But a lot of people around the league, a lot of fans may not have seen that, because who wants to watch the worst place team in the league lose games? But we knew, we all kind of were like, Blackwood's good. He's way better than his numbers would suggest, and he's proving it too. So
yeah, he definitely should have received more Four Nations consideration, even when he was with the Sharks. That was a bit of a snub for sure, that he wasn't even mentioned in consideration. And for all the work he did with the Sharks, he definitely should have been. And I do want to emphasize that this isn't a revisionist history take on a trade. I'm still going to say it was a good trade by the Sharks and Mike Greer. A lot of it is because look at the contract that Blackwood signed. That doesn't line up with Askarov. Askarov has 2 years on a contract after this season. And so Askarov's contract is going to expire 26-27. At that point, you're probably hoping that Askarov performs well enough that he's going to get number one starter money. And so you can't be paying Askarov, say, 10 million, 9 million, 8 million, and have Blackwood as your backup or kind of your very expensive 1B at 5 million. That just doesn't make sense for your budget. So I get that trade. I'm okay with this trade. This isn't the Granlund trade in my mind. There's very, very different things here. So I just want to emphasize that part of it, that it's not a revisionist take, but you can see how much goaltending matters, though. It also reminds me actually of a conversation there's a story that I put out on it, or one of my writers, William Espy, wrote it about kind of the Askarov effect on the Barracuda and how much confidence and how much swagger he gives that Barracuda team. Because, of course, with the Barracuda, it's a better team anyway, but his save percentage for the Barracuda is like a 930 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And he makes them look like a Calder Cup contender. I think if you take Askarov out the team and put an average goaltender for a Barracuda, I think they're a playoff team, but I don't think that they're a kind of a true Calder Cup contender. That's not a deep enough team overall. So anyway, a goaltender can do that for you, give you that swagger, that confidence. He's going to paper over your mistakes. He's going to erase those mistakes and you can play kind of free. And when you play free, you make a few mistakes, yes, but you also create more offense. And so there's kind of that the goaltender can tip the scales of that, where the playing free doesn't hurt you like it would if you just have average to bad goaltending. And so that's a potential that Askarov can bring to the Sharks one day. Not quite there with the Sharks, obviously, because he had struggled his kind of previous few games, but that's kind of the potential that he can bring to the Sharks. And that matters so much. And we see that in the minor league system with what Askarov has done for the Barracuda, but you also can see that in the NHL with I looked at a stat a week ago about how good the goaltending has been in Anaheim. Dostal and then John Gibson, I think recently has come on too. And that's a big reason why they're 500. Anaheim's not a very good team. And yet somehow I think they're 9 points out of a playoff race. They're exact 500. And they would not be there without Dostal and Gibson performing as they have. I asked the scout, actually, I was curious about it. And I asked him, like, do you see that much difference between the Sharks and the Ducks right now? And of course, the Ducks are ahead of the Sharks in their rebuild. I think they've been actively rebuilding for longer. But I just asked him, like, yeah, like, is there that much of a difference? And he was like, I don't think so. He doesn't think that the Ducks are a very good 5-on-5 team. And so a lot of it is the goaltending. And not to say that if the Sharks had, say, Blackwood and Askarov like for an entire year, that they'd be even 500. I don't think they would be, but it would be significantly better because I think the goaltending, again, makes such a difference. It makes you a better player too, because you're not worried about every mistake getting behind your goalie, that you can play a little more free. You can kind of make mistakes, but also the good and the bad. You can get the good from the playing freer too, and not just the bad. Because right now, if you're the Sharks, you play free, it ends up in the back of your net, and that's sort of the lesson right now. And so, anyway, I guess it all leads to say that,
the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yes. The
Simpsons
gift. Yeah, it's the Simpsons gift. Yeah. Stop it. He's already dead.
He's already dead. I do think we need to, just like we did last year at this time, focus on the little things, focus on the player improvement specifically, not the team improvement, because the team is not going to get much better, but the players themselves, you got to look for just those bright spots of improvement, like Will Smith, like Macklin every night, like Eklund. So you just need those little things to keep you going. And then also watch the Barracuda, because they're going to be great.
I do want to add, though, on the team side, though, that I think you want to see them stay competing against.
Yes.
I understand kind of losing your spirit against the Dallas and the Florida a little bit. I just, it's kind of like junior varsity versus varsity. You have no chance. It's like being the worst team in the AHL going against Team Canada at Four Nations. You just got no chance. But some of these kind of mid-range teams, like we mentioned, the Vancouver and Montreal game is good. That's the kind of compete that you need. At Seattle, no, you can't do that. Seattle's not a good team. You got to show up, for games like that. And so I think that's one of the ways I'll kind of look at it, to see if Warsofsky's message is still resonating, which I think that this week showed that it is. After that Seattle loss, they had 4 or 5 days off. They had like 3 practices. There was talk about, there's a line in the sand here that we got to draw. This was before they traded Granlund, though, which obviously affects Granlund and Ceci, which obviously affects how you can defend that line in the sand if you're the Sharks. But I think that the Vancouver Montreal game showed that they can try. They can try to play the right way. And when they do make mistakes, that it's not as, because teams like Montreal and Vancouver can't take advantage of the mistakes. They're not quite as able to as Dallas can. So games stay closer. You stay more encouraged. You stick with it. So I think that's part of it, that like we are going to see more of these blowouts, but it still needs to kind of, how do you say it? Like you can't just give in either. And that's kind of the line that I'm talking about. And this week showed, even with the Dallas blowout, that the Sharks haven't given in yet. And that's going to be part of Warsofsky's job, to make sure that they do not give in completely, like maybe last year's Sharks did to some degree.
Yeah, the Edmonton game last year really stuck out to me as like a team that gave up. Like that one
end of the season one, the last one. Yeah.
Yep. So that's the game that we got to look out for, is I think that game ended up like 9-2 or 8-2 or something terrible, but it was like you could tell by the end of the first period they'd given up, like completely done. And that's what you're looking to avoid. Like you're saying, you can't, you can't be that bad that you're not skating anymore, that you're not attempting to even make a forward pass, like that you're just kind of chipping it out and hoping that they don't score on you the next shift. Like, there's got to be some pushback. And I think the talent level has risen in some of the players like Macklin, that it will, they're still going to be a threat when they're on the ice, even if they're getting beaten. So hopeful that they won't be as terrible.
Yeah.
And like I said, and I think also it does kind of make me a little sad as a Sharks fan watching Macklin like put all of that Vancouver game on himself. Like it was so, he put so much on.
He was so good in that game. He was so good.
He was great.
He was fantastic in that game. He was actually the Dallas game that he came out and talked, and I give him a lot of credit. I wrote a story about it. He came out and took questions like a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually bad against Dallas. He wasn't the reason why they lost. Like Ryan Warsofsky said, he could have benched 14 players. He benched Henry Thorne in that game. He could have benched his entire team. But like Macklin self owned up to, he was really bad with the puck in that game. He was forcing plays that weren't there. Yeah. What Macklin said though was that Dallas, I think the reading between lines of what he said, it was not that the Sharks stopped competing for the most part in that game, but just that Dallas was so good.
Yeah.
But either way though, Macklin as your number one, look, you made him your number one center. There's no question about it anymore. There's no Granlund to insulate him at all or protect him at all. He is your number one center. And if he is trying all these passes in offensive zone that are getting picked off and leading to Dallas counterattack, which is part of what happened in that game, the Sharks puck management was terrible throughout the game, and it just kind of fed into the Dallas rush. That's just something that like it's good for him to own up to it, but it also kind of is glaring too that like the Vancouver game, he looks like he's the reason why, but he's the reason why the game was close. He was terrific in that game defensively. I was watching him every shift. Dallas game, he slipped though. Hey, he's a rookie. He's 18-year-old, so it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good that he's taking some responsibility either way, right? It's just
yeah, it is.
I hope, again, he's 18. He's going to, hopefully, when this starts to turn around, these will be far distant memories for Macklin, that this was a bad Sharks team, but you don't want them to affect too long.
I like that he recognized it quickly, though, and he said it right after the game. I think just judging on everything I've heard about him, talking to people, even just from a distance that aren't whatever bias toward him, right? Like the Sharks or whatever, right? That like he's a guy that will learn from that. And that Dallas game, there will be more of those Vancouver games where he is almost dominating defensively, and less of these Dallas games where he is forcing things and the Sharks are getting destroyed for it.
Anything else for the state of the Sharks that you want to talk about before we move on to a couple players?
No. I think that's the general just sort of. I think it's just interesting that that these like up down games this year, whereas early in the season when the team was more complete and there was more to play for and they had Blackwood too, that the Sharks, there was a little more steadiness in their play because they could trust their goaltending and they could, all these other things, right? And they had better players too. Whereas now, it's been so up and down over the last month, and I think it is going to kind of continue that way. And just Warsofsky's going to have to ride this wave, and kind of when they get beat up like they do against Dallas, against Seattle, against Florida, Warsofsky's going to kind of have to right that ship and keep telling them drill it into them. They got to play a certain way to win hockey games, and eventually hopefully those lessons kind of they can manifest next year into more wins.
Briefly, we had a call up of Andrew Poturalski from the San Jose Barracuda for 3 games, which he scored 1 assist in, and has been sent back to the Barracuda. How did you think he did? My first thought, just briefly, is that he looked like Danny O'Regan. And if you remember Danny O'Regan, just like similar size right-handed center that has like a little bit of a grit and a little bit of some jam to his game, and then I don't know, kind of disappears at times. But I thought he played well. I mean, he looked excited and was skating like wasn't quitting even in some bad games. So I don't know. What did you think?
I think he was a bit overmatched.
Yeah.
I think the pace was too great, and his size and skating, they're fine for the AHL because he's so good in AHL,
Yeah.
but they aren't they with the pace being a big rate for him, that his size and skating aren't things that can help compensate for that, because he's not a big guy and he's not the quickest guy. He's a very crafty player offensively. He made a couple of really, really good plays.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately he's 31. There's always a hope. You never know. You give a guy this shot, right? And Warsawski had mentioned that in his recent kind of stints in the NHL, he only played 6 NHL games before this. I think he had 2-game auditions in each of parts of 3 seasons.
Yep.
With the Hurricanes and the Kraken. That a couple of these stints he was also shoveled onto the 4th line, which of course is not his game at all. Here he got a chance. He got a real chance, right? He got some power play time. Granted, the Sharks' second line is not a league best, a playoff worthy top 6 line with Zetterlund and Will Smith. But these guys both have skill, though, Zetterlund and Smith. And from what I saw with Poturalski, though, that if we're being honest, like it's going to be a little more of if he stays with the Sharks, they may call him back up because they have no better option at center. Well, they do have Wenberg. So when Wenberg gets healthy, Wenberg's been hurt since I think late January, and Wenberg is expected to be ready after the 4 Nations break. So I think actually when that happens, that Poturalski, I think we may have seen the last of Poturalski there if Wenberg is healthy.
Yep.
But in terms of what I actually saw from him in an NHL, unfortunately, it's not enough of a package. He has obvious skill, but it's not enough though to kind of stay up in the NHL and play a kind of middle 6 center role, which is which he has to play because he's not necessarily a 4th line center type. So there's not enough though going on there, even though there were some good things going on.
Yeah, it's another example that we've talked about a lot of just where do you fit based on your skill set in an NHL lineup, and he's kind of the perfect example of just that. There's just a lot of little things that make him into a very good minor league hockey player in the AHL.
Great room guy too. I want to add too, yeah.
And that also makes him super valuable for an AHL club, right? Like he's a sought after player, and it's just not enough to really combine into a everyday NHLer. And there's the list of these guys are, hundreds deep at this point in NHL history. It's the kind of the same story. So whenever you're looking at players and how they develop, just keep that in mind, is that there really has to be some standout reasons why they make the NHL most times, especially guys that are undersized. So, but
I want to add too,
he looked like he was obviously like overmatched, but I enjoyed some things. He does have some skill with the puck.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. He does. There's a reason why he's led the AHL in points, I think 2022. And he was leading the AHL in points when the Sharks called him up. Yep. And I think it's outstanding that he was called up too. There's sort of a whatever, not cliche, but everyone expects, you got to call up your prospects at these moments when you're a rebuilding team. Guys like Sabrin, who was called up a couple weeks ago, and Poturalski, I don't think they come to the Sharks if there's no path for NHL time. Mm-hmm. And not like there's a guarantee, but if they do their jobs and they do it well in the AHL, that there should be some reward of NHL time, a chance to show that they really, really do belong. And in most cases, of course, it doesn't happen. That's just the reality of it. I think these guys know it too, right? That there's a reason why you're in your 30s, like Sabrin and Poturalski, and you've yet to establish yourself in the NHL. And you've been on the radar for years in the sense that you've been in AHL for years. It's not like you're not getting seen by AHL scouts or North American scouts, but that, hey, you still deserve a shot at it. And you never know, things happen. There are players that have been in AHL for a long time. I mean, just historically, guys like Dan Boyle, I think Marchessault was a guy like that too, that just it kind of clicks. 1 year it clicks for whatever reason. They're like, oh, hey, this guy is actually a legit AHL player, despite their kind of drawbacks that you see at first. And
Mhm.
so I think it's good on not good on the Sharks. It's more like it's intelligent of the Sharks to look. The Sharks are not gonna. It's not like the Sharks are contending for a playoff spot and they're saying, "Hey, Andrew Poturalski,
Mhm.
here's a second line spot." That's trouble if you were thinking that way. But Sharks are where they are in the standings, and you need to have a strong Barracuda team. And guys like Sabrin, like Poturalski, make it a strong Barracuda team. Like I mentioned, both good in the room. Actually, Poturalski outstanding in the room. Based on John McCarthy said last week that Poturalski and Jimmy Schultz they helped transform the Barracuda room, and now the Barracuda are right where they are for the playoff run, their playoff run. And so I did want to mention that I have no issue with Poturalski coming up and seeing, hey,
Got it.
he's been
Yeah.
so productive in the AHL. Let's see what he can do here. But it is my great story, great guy. But it is that, yeah, that's what I saw though in those 3 games, though. A guy that isn't quite going to stick.
And yeah, we need to give some credit to the Barracuda for just that overhaul. That was the exact thing that was missing from the Barracuda team in prior years was a guy like Podorowski.
Mhm.
Like we had some other fill-ins as well, but it seems like he's really done a great job with that team. So, and he's here for next year too. So excellent. It's a win-win all around. I'm sure he's
Yeah.
happy with this call up and gonna help lead the Barracuda to a much better place than the Sharks are going to be.
Yeah.
An interesting
Yeah.
call up. Go
Mhm.
ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was going to move on to Shakir
Yeah.
Mukhamadullin, who was also called up this week. We had a decent couple games from Mukhamadullin, I feel like. Still trying to find um, that level of, not even consistency, that level of shine that maybe last year he was having. And Greer had mentioned that too in his availability, that he thinks that at the end of last year he was playing very, very good hockey, and we're still trying to get to that point, but he didn't get sent back down, which I thought was interesting. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. Whether or not that's just like roster moves, who knows? But he didn't get sent back down when everybody else did, including Jack Thompson.
Right. I'm not so sure about that. Yeah. Why he didn't could just be maybe he wasn't going to play, and
Mm-hmm.
Thompson's going to play. The Barracuda have a lot of players in their lineup now. Since they sent down, I think Graf was sent down, right?
Yep.
Poturalski, Thompson, and who else? There was one more player sent down. Yeah.
I think it was just those three, right?
Oh, those three. Okay.
And Mukhamadullin
Um,
stayed up. Yeah.
Right, Mukmuddin stayed up. Who knows? Mukmuddin might be nursing some kind of injury too, small injury. But
Sure.
I think overall, though, if we talk about more about just Mukmudin's course of the season, spoke with
Yeah.
a scout recently. They still all love the tools, but the tools, definitely tools of a fourth line. I'm sorry, a top four defenseman, middle pairing defenseman. But obviously, though, it's really been a struggle this year for him. Just hasn't really come together, and it didn't really come together this past week. Though I liked what I saw from him in the Montreal Vancouver games.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, everybody was bad in the Dallas game. I guess that's kind of what you look for too, like a player that can, even in a very bad situation, be a cut above everybody else, like a Macklin often shows himself to be. And not quite seeing that from Mukhamadullin, him impacting the defense in that kind of way. And so I'm not sure. We're getting to a point where this is, again, after the break, this is going to be a big audition, I think, for Mukhamadullin to kind of change the narrative, change the course of his season. Right now, the course of his season is that this was a step back from last year, which is obviously not what you want. Granted, developing defense is very, very difficult too. And so he does kind of have that you don't give up on him, because
Mm-hmm.
this isn't the defense can defend. The development isn't linear, especially with defensemen, I think. So, but I very curious though how he comes back these last 25 games, and if he can be that assertive kind of two-way defenseman that they want him to be, offensively and defensively. You still see it, the skating, the reach. Can he does make impact plays from time to time. in these games, right? I think it was the Vancouver game where they just kind of he got a bad pass behind Vanecek, and there's 2 forecheckers right around him, Vancouver forecheckers, and he was able to get his way out of that. And he has that kind of ability, but of course, though, consistency.
I think it was in your story, the was one paraphrasing, like, what does Mukhamadullin need to do to stick in the NHL kind of thing. That one of the scouts mentioned he looks afraid to make a mistake. And I saw that too. There was a bunch of times where it felt like there was an option for him to skate it out or to make a play or attempt a stretch pass, that he just kind of did the very safe play instead. It was like a Mukhamadullin that looked afraid, and that's not what they want. They want him to, well, I don't know what they want him to do, but what you want to see is him making impact plays, like you said, and not just trying to make the safe play or being afraid to make a mistake. That's what it felt like, at least.
It's such a delicate balance, though. When we go back to the goaltending, right? Like when you're goaltending, when your goaltending doesn't give you that swagger, you're more afraid to make plays. And that's one of those subtle things about, if you were to criticize Mike Grier for trading Blackwood or not having Askarov up this year, like it creates an environment that is hard to grow in, because you don't want to, even if your coach says you can keep playing even though you're a -4 and the team is down 7-2, you don't want to see that red light go off. You don't want to be, even if you're just trying something, right? So that's the environmental stuff that's I think that is very subtle, the team building stuff, the environment that you put your prospects in. And again, I'm not being revisionist about the Blackwood trade, but these are not to repeat myself from last week. And I know I repeated myself a lot last week, and I apologize for that. But trades like the Granlund trade, right, where you're making your environment that much harder for your prospects to develop in. So anyway, I just want to mention that, though, in terms of Mukhamadullin, and I don't know exactly where his headspace is. I know that he wants to be more aggressive. The coaching, those are the words that are coming out of his mouth, Warsawski's mouth, and all that stuff, right? But when the team environment around you is very, very tough, very, very hard, that it's not encouraging for you to try stuff, maybe that makes you afraid, even if in your mind you want to be more aggressive.
Yeah, and I'm sure he wants to stick at the NHL as long as he can right now to get his wheels back under him and on NHL speed, essentially.
Right.
Maybe this break will do him a little bit of good. Maybe there's still some lingering injury concerns or soreness, or who knows. So maybe this break is actually going to help him come out looking more confident. That's what I think we should be looking for. Just a more confident movement.
I hope so.
Even if he makes mistakes, just more confidence. Speaking of confidence, I really like Colin Graf. Got his first NHL goal this week, correct? Was it this week?
Yep. Yes, it was the Vancouver game. Yeah.
Was it Vancouver? Yes.
Yeah, it was the Vancouver game.
Also got sent down, but I think it was a successful call up all in all. I mean, anytime you get your first NHL goal, successful call up for sure. But I like him as a player. I think he has a lot of interesting up and down the lineup qualities, and they even played him on the penalty kill, which we mentioned a few podcasts ago.
Oh, sorry, his goal was Montreal, by the way. Just wanted to...
Montreal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't keep all these losses together. They all just kind of blend together.
They all bleed and blend together.
But good for Colin, and I'm sure he's going to go down to the Barracuda and light it up. But yeah, I liked what I saw from him overall. I think he has the look of, and this is one of the things that people talk about, like in the scouting departments all the time, is the look of an NHLer. Like it just feels like he is. I don't know what that is. We'll see, obviously, but that's what it feels like.
Well, the look of NHL, I think a lot of it is his priorities in his game. And even though he has been super productive in AHL this year, that his priorities in his game aren't just scoring. And John McCarthy said that pointedly. I asked John McCarthy after the recent Barracuda game. I think it was Askarov's first game back with the Barracuda. And I asked him about Graf, and one of the things that stood out to me about Graf was that he got sent down, but he got called up right back a week later.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of productive Barracuda prospects right now. I think Thomas Bordalo's been like a point per game player for the last 20 or so games. Gushin has been productive recently. I think just the last game, I think he had 2 goals, almost had a hat trick. There might be a Beestead. Beestead is a center. You want to be more careful about that, but Beestead has very, very good games and overall has had a strong rookie season for the Barracuda. I think he's averaging about like more than half a point a game, maybe point 6, 0.7 in that range, right?
Yep.
So there are prospects down there that you're like, well, why you gave Graf a chance? Why don't you give Beestead a chance? Why don't you give Bordalo and Gushin another chance? There's even Cardwell down there too.
Sure.
Graf has emerged as, I think, and we made this mistake. We thought that this might be the Cardwell season. He might take over the Barracuda. But
Yeah.
actually, it turns out that it's the Collin Graf season with the Barracuda. From Sport Contract, great. Sport Contract is maybe this some of the details I may be missing here, but they're a third party hockey website that allows they have a library of hockey games from all the leagues in the world, literally every league in the world pretty much, right? Even the lower levels. And scouts can dig through that, cut tape from it and whatnot. And anyway, I work with them and they have AHL stats. They have time on ice, AHL time on ice.
Mhm.
And Graf leads the Barracuda forwards in time on ice.
Wow.
And that's
I didn't know
impressive,
that.
right? More than
Mhm.
Poturalski, definitely more than anybody else you can think of, right?
Yeah.
And I asked McCarthy about that. McCarthy's like, yeah, he's first. He's the first off the bench for the penalty kill. He's first off the bench for the power play, and obviously too, he's the 5-on-5 too. I think he plays on the first line when he's with the Barracuda. And I asked McCarthy too about Graf kind of standing out and being called up again last week, even though there are other Barracuda prospects who have been very good too.
Mhm.
And he said that basically, kind of paraphrasing here, but he said that basically that yeah, like scoring's not the only thing that Graf is focused on or that Graf is good at.
Yep.
And so, anyway, to answer what you said, what's the look of an NHL player? That's a lot of it right there. Just mentality. It's a lot of it just your attitude and how you play. I don't mean
Mhm.
attitude like like having a smile at practice or working hard. It's just the approach of how you play. It's the difference of Macklin Celebrini, right, versus Connor Bedard. It's
Yep.
approach. It's what you prioritize in your game. And so, yeah, so I think that was very, very impressive. Colin Graf showing this year has been very, very impressive in that sense because I know I think he won like forward of the year for his like college a conference, but I wasn't sure last year what that meant, like how that translates, but it
Yep.
has definitely translated this year. And so there are still of course, he's just 22. There's still a lot to work on. In that Dallas game, I watched him get, I think, dummied by, I think it was Mason Marchment. Of course, Mason Marchment is a legitimate NHL power forward through and through. But so those are things that he's still got to work on, obviously. But anyway, what does a NHL prospect look like?
Yeah.
And I think someone asked me in my comments, why isn't Bordalo getting a shot? And you can say that about, again, some of these other guys too, right? I would say with Beestead, by the way, just to mention him, that he's a center. You don't want to throw him into your 2C job immediately in the mixture like that. That's not fair to him.
Yeah, that's not
That's
gonna
such a
work.
bad idea. That's such a bad idea. So
Yeah.
don't do that to him. Don't pencil him in for an NHL role next year. Being an NHL center is really, really hard. So don't do that to him. That's not good for him, I think. But anyway, though, with Grafto specifically, though, like yeah, like his focus, his what he thinks about in the game, and we can see it in his performance. What he prioritizes, how he approaches the just where the puck is. and what he's thinking, right, is why he is in the NHL and why he's been in the NHL twice over some other guys who are also very, very productive in the AHL.
Yeah, and I do think that Cardwell's having a good season as well, and I think he's probably in line for another call up at some point, likely after the trade deadline. I think they value Graf's like body type a little bit more. It feels like maybe, but I do like it just in general that both Cardwell and Graf kind of are this, like, Cardwell's your very standard, typical fourth line NHL forward. I feel like he's got a lot of energy. He's got a touch of skill. He's got an okay shot. Because it's got a lot of can make plays off the rush, but more so than that, it's just a lot of retrieval skills for Cardwell. And I think Graf has a little bit more versatility into the top line as opposed to somebody like Cardwell. But I like that both of them are not just our like superstar picks are hitting, but there are some prospects that are also developing to take further roles for the Sharks, even on the depth side. So I like that. Because it used to be that you had to hit the prospects had to hit like they had to hit because there was no other prospects, and now we've got like a multitude that are actually starting to develop. So
right, and to your point,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. To your point though, that I think Graf and Cardwell represent too that they are players that you need depth guys to succeed too.
Yep.
And that's part of what happened to the Sharks system, I think, the last 5 years, right? That of course none of the guys were productive in AHL. They weren't hitting as top six, like top contributors in AHL, but the Sharks still had Timo Meier, they had Tom Marshall, they had Logan Couture, but the guys also weren't hitting in death roles either. They weren't very good depth players either, and you need that for a good AHL team. You need a good third line, you need a good fourth line, and so guys like Graf and Cardwell present that, at least the potential of. They're not quite there yet, but definitely you can see how their game translates to being very, very solid third line, fourth line players, which are again very, very important. It's sort of maybe a draft philosophy thing that there's some teams that emphasize trying to hit and get top six guys, and when you get them, that's of course a big deal. The Sharks, though, they seem a little more mixed though in their draft approach, where they draft high end guys or guys that if they hit that they're going to be on your top six, guys like your Musty and your Chernishovs, but also too guys like Cardwell and Cardwell is from the last regime, but a guy like Graf, signing a guy like Graf, where you see his overall game and you see maybe he ends up on a third line, but that is again super, super valuable. If
but they also got guys like Svoboda and Wetch that they grabbed in the draft, where they even on draft day are like, this guy could be a bottom six winger or center, and like they aren't like, oh, he's going to be a superstar, but they see the frame of what he could be.
It's a different approach. Yeah, I'm not advocating one or the other. I mean, I think Carolina clearly is the one that they always kind of go for the home run swing, and obviously when it hits, it hits. But I think that it's for either way though. Even if you draft like Carolina does, then Carolina probably needs to sign more of their bottom six guys, like William Carrier, guys like that. They need to sign more of them, which is fine too. Sign or trade for those types. With the Sharks, though, some of it's coming up more through the system, but it's good though, in my mind, though, to see this diversity of type of players, because they bet on Gushin, on Bordelot, on those. If those guys hit, those guys are going to be second line players. They're going to contribute 20 goals. That's really, really important. But then if they don't hit, though, they have basically no role in the NHL. And whereas guys like Cardwell and Graf and Svoboda and Wesh, if they don't become 20 goal scorers in NHL, well, they can still help you.
Yeah, just interesting team building, drafting philosophy. And they're still taking big. So it helps when you have more picks, right? Like the Doug Wilson Jr. era, they had that. One day we'll do a draft retrospective on Doug Wilson Jr. because I feel like we talk about him a lot. But they didn't have a lot of picks too. There wasn't a lot of pick for him to make.
I think it was a 2019, right? They had like only 5 picks, and their first pick was Kenyazev, like late in the second round or something like that. So
yeah, so it looks ugly, but they were also picking late every year, and there was a few misses in there. But even the 2020 draft, he just had a ton of picks, but they were all like 32nd and higher. So, or 31st was it? I can't remember. So it's still late picks. Anyway, yeah, I liked what I saw from Colin Graf. I think he's got a future, like you said, in the lineup. Okay. We've talked a little bit about the state of the Sharks and some players. It's time to talk about trade deadline candidates. What we think these players, do they get traded or not? And how much we think they might go for at the trade deadline. Let's start with Nico Sturm, who's been injured. So it's kind of tough to actually make a prediction on this one, but
yeah, we're going to talk about a couple injured guys here, right? Yeah. And also before we get into this too, we talked about Wenberg being hurt. Kovalenko is also hurt too, but he should also be back after the Four Nations. And Kostin has been hurt for a while, but he was a candidate to play actually the last game versus Dallas, and so he should be ready to go after Four Nations. So the Sharks will be getting some depth back in their lineup, which is going to help them against to ward off some of these embarrassments, I guess. But with Nico, though, yeah, I've got to check in on some of these guys to see where the market is. It was so Granlund focused, obviously, over the last week or so here. So I think with Nico, though, I do think the same thing, though, that he probably does get traded. This is my guess. Won't be for a lot, but he is a 4C type that can help, I think, pretty much any team in a depth capacity. Even if he's not an every night player for some team, he's a guy that you can kind of plug into your fourth line and even play up third line a little bit, which he's done for the Sharks. And he can give you some games there on the third line, and he can be every day fourth liner. So it sounds like for a depth team, if you need an extra center, that he's going to be a pretty solid 12th or 13th forward.
Yeah, and he's at $2 million AAV and is a UFA, so not terrible, swallowable. No. I think for a team, I guess.
No, yeah. This shouldn't be a problem. That shouldn't be a problem.
Interestingly, I just was looking at Nico's stats. His and this is probably just a product of Wenberg and Smith and Granlund, and Celebrini. But his time on ice has gone from like 1440 both years with the Sharks to 951. So like a whole 5 minutes less time on ice, which is kind of, I don't know if shocking is the word, but interesting, I guess. I just didn't realize it was so low.
Yeah. I think that when the Sharks were healthy and Celebrini has proven to be a top 6 center, and Granlund and Wenberg is actually excellent 3C, or at least a good 3C, that Sturm is kind of in a more proper place. And so the Sharks, that's why part of the reason why the Sharks look better this year, because when they had all 4 centers there and they're kind of in proper-ish roles, like Wenberg is more of a middle 6 center, right? Like 2C stretching a little bit, but you can play it. Whereas Granlund and Celebrini, they're both probably on a good team. They're second line centers, and putting them up to first line stretching a little bit, but still the centers were more or less properly slotted. I think also with Sturm too, and to his credit too, I think his defensive zone starts this year have been a bit up a bit. Borowski, I think, tends to use that fourth line, at least when it's healthy, in sort of a defensive stopper-ish kind of role. Whereas before, Sturm's usage was a little more mixed. He was playing more minutes, and he was being asked to provide a little more offense. And so I think he's done okay with that, Sturm, in sort of this more limited role. He's done a good job. You don't hear him complain. He just works his ass off. Everyone talks about just how just insane. He's always working out. He's always on ice. So yeah, he's gonna be a good ad, I think, for a contender at a fair price. Just wouldn't expect much if you're the Sharks. Maybe a 5th rounder. I don't know. A 4th at best.
Yeah, or the classic 5th conditional 4th, conditional 5th.
Something like that. Yeah,
5th if Nico Sturm scores 5 playoff goals or something, or 4th if he something.
He's also too not a guy that I necessarily would guess, and I gotta check in on this too. But I would guess that he doesn't he doesn't stay because his ideal slot as a 4C that is more replaceable. And so in the big picture, NHL picture, as
Yeah.
much as he is a leader sort of in the gym and whatnot. And so there's a lot to like about Nico. If they end up keeping him, I don't think there's not a problem with it.
Yeah.
I think the most immediate center that you see going, being called up by the Sharks is Beast. The most immediate prospect is Beasted.
Yeah.
And I'm especially with centermen and defensemen, it's really hard to pencil them into lineups,
Yep.
legitimate NHL lineups, unless you want to scar them for life. So if you want Dickinson up here next year, if you want to pencil in Dickinson and Cagnoni next year, good luck. I,
Scarred for
uh,
life.
very possible, but this is me trying to do my
Yeah.
face. so, so there's some meme that has a face like this that I can't quite replicate, but anyway, yeah, I think that's a really bad idea though, especially in those kind of high leverage positions.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I wouldn't have a problem if they brought back Sturm, but I do think that if you trade him for what you can get for him, and then you can sign a good stopgap 4C in the
Yep.
off season, those are both doable things. So.
Speaking of defense, Jan Rutta, last year of his $2.75 million contract, also injured, right?
Yep. But also should be back after 4 Nations.
Yeah. Hot take. Not even a hot take. I don't think Rutta is traded. Not for any other reason that I don't think there's a market that really values everything that he has right now at that price.
I think he will get traded. I think that I gotta check. This is me, just like what I see out there, and maybe I'll talk to some scouts and be like, no, he's done.
Yeah.
I think that he's been much better in. They started the season with him and Ferraro as sort of the middle pairing. Rutta has no business playing up there at this point in his career. Actually, speaking of, if Rutta had been healthy and there was a Czechia entry into the 4 Nations, that Rutta would have been under defense and probably top 4 under defense, because there's not a lot of Czech defensemen in the NHL. And even if you pull from the Czech leads or whatever, Rutta is still going to be one of the better defensemen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of it's kind of funny to think about. But anyway, though, that I think Rutta can. I think that Rutta hasn't lost as much as. I think that he can still provide valid kind of bottom pairing minutes, penalty kill minutes. He is still, in my mind, on the Sharks, still one of the better defensemen along the wall, in the front of the net. He is a poor puck mover. He's not even like kind of okay-ish at it. I would say he is poor. And so that does knock down his value there. I can see him being a good sort of 7th defenseman option for a contender.
Yeah.
And maybe not an every night ball pairing guy anymore, but I can see that getting something. He's also right-handed too, so that's something else.
Never hurts.
That doesn't. Yeah, there is definitely a lack of right-handed defensemen in the league overall. So I do feel more comfortable that Sturm is getting moved. I would say that I would trend toward. I do think that Rutta gets moved for about the same that Sturm gets back, maybe a little bit less. And yeah, also too that I do doubt the Sharks bring him back, because bottom pairing stay-at-home defenseman you can I think find in free agency. We're also good in the room and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Luke Kunin, and I don't know why my brain still thinks that Luke Kunin's contract expires as an RFA. It does not. He's a UFA.
It does not. He's a UFA. Yeah.
I think it was just last time that he got signed, it was an RFA, and I can't believe that it's already been like 2 years.
3 years. Yeah, since that trade.
I know.
Yeah, summer 2022. Yeah, John Leonard.
Wild.
Single tier.
Single tier for John Leonard, Ryan Leonard's brother.
As he's now known.
Well, maybe Ryan Leonard is John Leonard's brother.
We'll find out.
Not
likely, but
not likely.
Not likely.
But anyway, yeah, I can't believe it's been 3 years. I don't know why. It just seems like it's gone so quickly. Kunin, yeah, this is tough. I really cannot predict whether or not he's getting traded. I think that they like Kunin, and I think it's really, I think it more depends on if Kunin wants to be here or wants to be with a different, probably lesser role with a contender, you know?
Yeah, I would say I
I can't
think
tell.
he doesn't get moved. This is my prediction now. I think we did this like a month ago during our mailbag, so
Yeah,
we might do it one more time before the deadline because we're still a month from the deadline.
yeah.
But I would say it's because I don't think he gets quite the price. Part of the trading Granlund was a first round pick because the Sharks definitely like Granlund. Let's not make any mistake about it. They weren't looking to just get rid of Granlund for anything. And so let's say the price for Kunin is obviously not a first round pick, but let's say the price for Kunin is say a third round pick. And maybe he gets that. He has shown more pop this year in his skating. He obviously has scored more this year. That pop in his skating has helped them play center this year, so he has a little more versatility. Whereas last year when he played center, I think it was a little bit more painful just because he wasn't 100% Luke Kunin. He was maybe 95% or 90 whatever. And so I'm not sure if he quite get the price, whatever they set for him. I'm not sure if he quite gets the price. I think he does like it here. I think that he would sign here, like Ranlin, for just a contract that makes sense for a team. He's not asking for a big contract. He's not big. He hasn't had a good enough season too, where like Granlund could ask for a long-term contract, whereas Cunning's not at that point anyway. So, and he's also good enough where he's not as replaceable in your lineup as a Nico Sturm is. Whereas Nico Sturm is a 4C, I think, at best. Kunin is a little more of on a really good team, he's on your fourth line. On a decentish team, he can still be on your third line. Like he's back to, I think, being the Kunin that he was his last year on Nashville when he was a third line winger on a playoff team.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a more value to that to other teams, but there's also more value to the Sharks too for keeping a guy like that can kind of play up and down your lineup a little more credibly than Sturm would, I think. So
even more credibly than guys like Dellandrea and Grunstrom, who are both going to be here next year.
Now at least. So I think I would trend toward that he doesn't stay. But Mike, it's the Granlund trade kind of made it pretty clear that if you meet his price, that au revoir. So whatever that price is for Kunin, I just suspect that a team won't meet it.
Got it. So if it was like, Mike's like, I want a second round pick, that it doesn't seem like it's.
Yeah, I don't see
what the
that.
price is, but
maybe a third. But maybe Mike has the price set a little higher because of Kunin's sort of resurgent year, and Kunin is a leader, good in the room, all that kind of stuff too. And I think he's happy here too. So yeah, so this would be my guess.
Yeah, I think the break time is probably going to be used as well to start speaking with agents like Kunin's agent and a couple other art UFAs to see if, hey, do you want to be here next year?
No, Mike's already had those conversations, I think, though, because Mike said in his availability that I do actually kind of believe this, that I think he has a sense of what everybody wants as free agents. And that's part of the conversation that's, I think, been had. But he's also going to see what he can get for these guys, too. Yeah. And so that made sense to me in terms of you set your price and you make it maybe a little higher than you think, and then see if the team will meet it or not. Yeah. So that part makes sense to me with Granlund and Kunin, and all those guys. So
I say Luke Kunin will be traded to like not a like playoff contender, but a playoff team. Somebody like, I don't even know how to name a regular.
You mean a team that's like not one of those like ninth place, 10th place teams are looking to get in, but you mean like a team that's
like a clear,
firmly entrenched.
Yeah, but maybe not like Stanley Cup contending team, but somebody who just wants to add a little bit more scoring pop.
Sure.
And I think that's And it really all is going to depend on if Luke also wants to be here too, I bet. So
again, I everything I've understood. Not just, again, I know that players say whatever they say when you talk with them. There's the
sure.
public thing too, but checking in a little bit, looking at things, I think he doesn't strike me as a guy just checking in on things and talking with people around the league that he's looking out the door. I mean, look, he's not Thomas Schertl where he can kind of write his own ticket. He's a guy
Yeah.
that he's got to take the next contract. He's got to set up his life.
Yeah.
If we're being honest, right?
Got to make money next.
Yeah. So, like, if the Sharks offer him a better contract than another team, then he's happier. If a cup contender like the Dallas Stars offer him a better contract than the Sharks, he's happy there because not that only does he get the money, it's tax free, but he can win the cup too. So
Hey.
I think that's a reality of sort of when you're leaving the star or fringe star tier of players.
Often talked about, never traded, is Mario Ferraro.
Great description. Often rumored, never traded.
Never traded. For years, I don't know, a long time.
Long time. Yeah, it's been a long
Mario
time.
Ferraro. We did,
Mario,
yeah, you're right. We did this on the mailbag as well. Talked about Ferraro. I don't think I've heard anything. Like, has there been any rumblings about Ferraro at all? I haven't heard. Like, Friedman normally drops something where he's like, teams are listening in on X, Y, and Z. And then you get Twitter.
I'm sure that's coming from him. I got to start
probably.
checking in too. Like I said, especially since trades can still happen during Four Nations too. So it's not a complete break. I still think he will not get traded. I know that last time you thought that he would. I
said Carolina, but they already made a huge trade, so it's not going to be Carolina.
Yeah,
not that Ferraro
they
is a
didn't
huge
have a
trade.
defenseman though. But if you trade a Ferraro and you've already traded the CC, who is going to play your minutes?
I have no idea.
It's already so bad already. It was so bad with Ferraro last year. Imagine if Ferraro wasn't there and you were tossing over whoever, Kalen Addison for 25 minutes a night.
Yeah.
You got to stop doing this at some point.
Yeah.
Especially when you have Macklin and you have Will there. You have players that you can't even if it's just for 20, it's not just 25. It's going to be a long slog of 2 months, man. So yeah, you got to have some players to play here. And so if you trade Ferraro and you traded CC, who is your
I mean, Wallman plays 30 minutes a night, essentially.
Oh, he shouldn't play 30 minutes a night, though.
No, that's an interesting.
He's not Chris Pronger.
It's an interesting discussion too. Has Wallman rehabbed his image enough that like teams are interested more in Wallman than they are in Ferraro? You know?
Yeah, I actually can see that. Yes, I can see that. Wallman has a lot of rough things in his game that I've talked about.
Yeah.
The Vancouver game was actually a great microcosm of the good and bad of Jake Wallman because Jake actually was terrific in that game. He was very active defensively, was really engaged, taking the body. I think that's a little off and on with his game, which is why one of his inconsistencies. The other part of it, too, was that he took that very needless penalty in that Vancouver game. I think someone got tangled up. I don't remember which, but Garland. And he just went in and gave him a little cheap shot, which wasn't much, but why? Garland's already down. Like that battle between Garland and I think whatever forward it was like a draw. Nothing was going to get called for that. And then you just go and give him a little bit of a cheap shot for no reason. You get a penalty for that. I don't think a goal was scored on it, but that was the kind of play that is not winning hockey. And so if you're a contender and you're looking for I think if you look at a Wallman at his best, I think he can be a middle pairing guy for a good team. But those are the little plays where like, well, yeah, he has that ability, and we've seen that more with the Sharks than in previous years, maybe. But those little things they lose you playoff games, things like that. Little just lack of discipline in certain places. And so I think that lowers his value on the other hand. But overall, though, the contract is good. The player has a lot of ability, but I think he still needs to kind of clean it up a bit to be sort of very, very attractive to a contender, I guess I would say. Like if he irons out these inconsistencies, he's consistently engaged. I know he's a smaller player, so I don't expect him to be some kind of defensive stopper. But I did like in that Vancouver game that there was looked like a concerted effort on his part to engage physically, to not lose battles. So if you get a consistently engaged Jake Walman defensively, along with his excellent skating, he's got a good defensive stick. He is talented offensively too. Like he has the ability. We have seen it this year. I think he does have the ability to be a solid, say, 40-point guy on a good team. 34, I think of maybe even up to a 40-point guy. That is not. He has the frame to be a good defenseman. He's not too small. He skates well. So he has a lot of the tools to be a very good defenseman in this league, a very good winning defenseman in this league, but hasn't quite put it together for the Sharks. And granted, it's a losing environment, but
he's the best we got.
He is the best the Sharks have, and maybe if he irons out some of these inconsistencies, next trade deadline it's going to be like, whoa. Like, do you extend Jake Walman for a lot of money, or do you trade him? But he's got things to work on in his game, is what I'm saying. And I don't mean that in a normal, like, everybody's got things to work on in his game, because everybody does. But I mean, like, there are very clear things that, in my mind, and talking with people too, other scouts, that separate him from being a legit top 4 defenseman in this league. Whereas right now, he is a top 4 defenseman, but it's for the worst team in the league, but a legit top 4 defenseman.
Yeah, and there's just and it becomes, because he has to play so many minutes for the Sharks, it just has become routine to see, like, the puck going in the net with him on the ice, like, a lot, especially that Dallas game, a lot. And I don't know but I think it's, like we said before, it's unlikely that either of these guys are traded, just because they have another year, and it feels like NHL GMs just don't do that. So it's unlikely.
They're a low enough figure, though, that maybe it creates less pause. Maybe if a Granlund had $5 million left next year because of the rising, but the now for certain rising cap, whereas before it was more speculated, that maybe teams would feel better about it too.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think if you see a Ferraro and a Jake Walman as being, like, right now for certain a solid middle pairing defenseman at 3.2, 3.4, what they make, right? That's an easy trade to make. But that's the thing, though. I don't think teams see those two as rock solid middle pairing guys.
Yeah,
they have the ability to do it, both of them. I've argued that about Ferraro for forever. With Walman, it's clear he has the ability to do it, but consistently, it hasn't been there. And for both of them, obviously. And so that's why I think it's more of a question mark. If it was a certainty, then Mike could be talking about getting first round picks for both. But I don't think that's how the league sees either of them.
Our last two on our list here are Georgiev and Vanecek.
Who we've talked about a lot. Yeah, they obviously will need good. Let's see. The Sharks' next game is February 23rd. The trade deadline is March 7th. So they both have 2-week auditions to really kind of play some games to make a team believe that they could be solid backups, at least for the stretch run.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Yeah, at this point, no, obviously. And a lot of it, again, is the environment that the Sharks put them in, the worst defensive environment in the league overall. So, yeah. So I'm not going to just throw dirt on them. I can see them going to better teams next year and doing a lot better because they're just in better situations. I don't think either are necessarily bad goalies, but it also takes a mindset, maybe, right, to be able just to deal with. I talked about being a defensive defenseman with the Sharks is the worst job in the league. I think you could say that, obviously, too, about being a goaltender for the Sharks. You need a special mindset, and you need the talent, too, that Blackwood had. He had kind of both, right? He had the talent, but he also had the mindset to sort of just deal with being under siege all night.
I think we should have put on here trade deadline candidates. Dallas 2025 first round pick as a trade
Oh, that's
deadline
fair.
candidate.
That's a fair one. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. I didn't think of that. That's fair.
We could have put bets on whether or not that pick is traded, and
Mm,
I think it's unlikely. It's more likely before the actual
the
draft, right?
draft.
But
Yeah. That would be my bet. I would say no.
yeah, there is rumors about Noah Dobson being available, but we didn't.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I try
Yeah,
to be careful about, all like reporting only Elliott and Pierre
absolutely.
LeBrun, and so that's why I haven't done anything on that. I think Elliott did talk about it today, but I think what he said was that it's not like he's largely available. It's more like if the Islanders like a guy
Yeah, it seems
that
like it's a specific player kind of thing.
right. And so, do you see anybody that the Islanders would like on the Sharks enough to do that? Right. And I don't think the Sharks have anybody like that because you're not trading Macklin or Will.
Yeah,
And as much as I like William Macklin, as much as we like William Macklin is not of that caliber yet that they're going to trade a 24-year-old defenseman who dropped 70 points last year and has the tools to be a number one defenseman, even with his current defensive shortcomings, but has all the tools to be a number one defenseman for William Eklund. So I'm not seeing that with the Sharks.
yeah.
So I think that subtlety is really important. That unless Islanders are looking into some kind of full rebuild where draft picks start to come in play,
Doesn't seem
that if
like
they're
it.
looking for like the guy kind of player, right? Just like Dobson is the guy kind of player, that it doesn't make sense. Obviously, Vancouver, Elias Pettersson has been rumored. That's a guy that obviously Pettersson's star has fallen, but
Yeah,
Pettersson is the guy kind of player. So the Sharks don't have that at the moment.
yeah. It's wishful thinking that they
I think
could find
so.
a
I think so.
package, but I don't think it's very likely.
I'm not seeing here. I mean, what is realistic? Yeah, like
It would have to be Eklund plus, and I don't know if
right.
the pluses even really get you there. And
Right. And is
yeah,
Eklund the centerpiece of a trade like that for them? So,
it
I
really
mean, I
depends on
guess you
the
can.
like the how much they do or do not like his next contract or whatever. But I don't know.
You can pile on Eklund and Zetterlund and have two good wingers, but again, that's trading quantity for quality.
Yeah,
And do the Islanders want that? I don't
and you're
think
still stripping the Sharks of like some of their only good forwards.
Sure, that's fair too, but you're still
Yeah.
getting if the Islanders were willing to entertain something like that,
Hmm.
where the Islanders get a lot of forward depth that way, at least adding Eklund and Zetterlund to their group. Yeah, maybe. And you're getting the best player in the trade in Dobson, so that's why that makes that okay. But I don't see the Islanders again making Dobson. And based on what Friedman said, it just didn't make sense. Like, why would the Islanders trade a 24-year-old
Yeah.
guy, a defenseman that's already produced at this league and has all the tools to be a number one defenseman, even if he's not quite there yet, for anything less than like basically something like a 1-for-1 trade or a guy, like I said, Pettersson makes sense. I don't know if you look around the league, who else is available that makes sense for a trade like this. Like,
Yeah.
I
Cousins
can't even think of
maybe,
anybody.
but
Yeah.
Cousins even him would need because his contract is
Oh
not.
yeah, that's an excellent point with Cousins. Cousins is young enough too, so yeah, it had to be a guy like that that's already kind of produced and is
Yeah.
probably a premium position guy.
Mhm.
Macklin is not a premium position guy either.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw it out there for everybody because it's been mentioned a lot on Twitter, but I don't know. I don't see it happening all that much, like you said.
Yeah, I don't see it until I hear that there's an open auction for
Hmm.
for Noah Dobson. Obviously, the Sharks have a need for a guy like that at that age, but yeah,
Yeah.
until you hear that's a little more open in terms of the availability, that it doesn't quite make sense. Yeah, for it's just not a good trade partnership right now.
All right. Our last topic of the day before we get to the interview with Colby, which is excellent, um, is Egor Chernishov. Um, So
let me take it over from here because this is going to be
go ahead.
your stage because you've watched plenty of
Yeah.
Chernishov. That Chernishov has 8 goals, 6 assists, 14 points in just 5 games with Saginaw. And Chernishov, of course, had a shoulder injury, required shoulder surgery at the beginning of the season. And so he's missed the entirety of the season, but he's hit the ground running with Saginaw. And I know a lot of Sharks fans are really excited about him. We've seen a lot of highlights of his, especially with the Sharks not providing too many highlights of their own.
Yeah.
And so anyway, what have you seen from Chernishov?
A lot of really great things. Chernishov is interesting because he had the shoulder injury, and I kind of expected him to have a little bit of a learning curve. Not that like he wasn't talented enough last year during his draft year or anything like that, just like to get back up to game speed. And while I do think that the speed of his game isn't all there, the brain and how he thinks seems to be very far ahead of the play in the OHL. Like his processing speed is excellent. His reading of the play, where to go, where to be, excellent. Tons of good handles, big frame. He protects the puck super well. Great looking shots. It's kind of like an all around. He's not more of a playmaker or a shooter, but he does have a very good shot. He looks really good, especially for a guy coming off of however long break, like a 6-month break essentially from hockey.
Long injury.
Which is,
longer than 6 months. We go
all the way to the
season,
draft.
right? So so we're talking like 10 months. Yeah, maybe
it's a
9
long
months.
time to not be playing hockey. And he stepped right in and looked from the get-go, from day one. From his, I think he scored on his first shift, I think, or had a point in his first shift. With Michael Misa, excellent. Speaking of Michael Misa, he's on fire with Chernishov. He has there's 15 points in 5 games since Chernishov came back, just like Chernishov has 14 in 5 games. So they look really good together. They complement each other super well. Misa's a high pace, high motor, great skater. Chernyshov's more of this patient, puck protecting winger who does have some rush qualities to him, but I think he needs some time to get up to game speed. Like I said, they complement each other super well. If I had to pick like a NHL comp in terms of just looking at him and who he reminds me of, and this is not to say that he will ever have a career like this, but he reminds me of like Mark Stone, where it's a very smart. Again, not to say he's going to be Mark Stone. I said I already prefaced it. I prefaced it.
I know. I'm just play acting here a little bit, but you mean Mark Stone, who is a first line winger on Team Canada?
Yes. That Mark Stone.
Okay.
Again, I want to preface, anytime you do an NHL comp, the comp should be more who they remind you of and how they play rather than their ceiling, right? Because the ceiling, I could say any middle 6 winger and I'd be like, probably that's the ceiling. Maybe a second line winger. But the comp is more like, who do they remind you of how they play the game? And that's who I kind of see is Mark Stone does not have the best wheels. He has some of the slower feet for a first line winger in the NHL. But he is a monster in puck protection. He is a heart and soul guy, gives a lot, both ends of the ice, has a great looking wrist shot, good playmaker, great hands. I don't know if Chernishov, again, has not reached that level, but just the way that he plays, at least offensively, reminds me of Stone a little bit. So again, don't quote me that Chernishov is going to be Mark Stone, because that's I think Mark Stone was a 2nd round pick too, if I remember right.
Yeah, Mark Stone.
Hell of a 2nd round pick.
Actually, Mark Stone, I think, was not even
Maybe
a 2nd round pick.
Or was he like a 6th round or something?
He was a 6th round pick. Probably because of his skating. Yeah. So that's kind of like a Joe Pavelski kind of draft pick right there. But
hell of a pick.
Yeah, I just
again, the way that I use comp,
a lot of big forwards out there.
I know, but I meant just like the way that they
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I know. Hey, Jason Robertson, how's that? Is that better? Is it still? It's still a first line forward with bad feet.
But the funny thing is, it's not busting my gut as much, Jason Robertson.
The funny thing is I honestly don't know if he does have bad skating. Like, he's got power to it and he can get up the ice very fast. It just looks like he kind of moves in slow motion, but I honestly don't know if he is slow. He very well might not be. It's just, and I looked through his draft year, a ton of scouting reports to try and figure what other people had said. The worst I could get was like average skater. On most reports, I think that was Corey's was like average. So I don't know. It's tough to tell because he thinks the game 2 steps ahead. It feels like,
So
but
I want to
it could
ask you
also just
about
be.
one.
Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt. I want to ask you
You're
about
good.
one quote though from Mike Greer on Chernishov,
Yeah,
and what do you think about it? Because he said Chernishov skates like the wind.
I know.
So what does that mean to you from what you're seeing? Because one thing I do, I'm not trying to ridicule you or Mike. I think skating is one of those things that we'll talk about this a lot with Luca Cagnoni in the future,
Yeah,
but
100%.
skating has a lot of different elements.
Yes.
And so maybe he skates like the wind when he picks up, like by the time he gets to the other blue line, it's like the wind, but it starts really slow. I don't really know. That's why I'm asking you, like, what you make of that quote. Like, what do you see that maybe he does excel at in skating?
Yeah, that's and I remember like that quote as well. And I had just because it's also not just me who said that since Chernyshov's come back. I've looked at
Mhm.
other people's scouting reports since he's come back, and they also mentioned that he just looks like he's a little slow. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's a conditioning thing or what. He just looks a little slower on the ice comparatively to, and he's also playing with Michael Misa, who's very, very fast.
Mhm.
He does get up to a good speed. I think on the rush, and when you get going, he does get up there. His turns look a little slow, so how he can maneuver with the puck, tight, not like that tight. I would say, so that looks a little slow, and then maybe the first couple of steps look a little clunky.
Mhm.
He's a little lumbering as well when he moves. So it could also just be that he's not up to conditioning. So when he's got those bursts, he's able to get up and skate like the wind. But that second or third burst on your shift is the one that you're slow on, and those are the ones that
Okay.
you see. So it could be a conditioning thing too, rather than like an
Okay.
actual skating issue. Because he again looks ahead of the play most times, not from a
Mhm.
positional standpoint, but from how he sees the play. So I don't know. It's tough. And if he develops like a great skating stride and he gets that speed, like he's going to be a monster because he's already very, very good, even with some clunky-ish looking feet. So, but he looks really, really good. And then, he helps that he's playing with future Shark Michael Misa. So
Hmm. Future shark. Like you
I don't
slipping
know.
that in there.
I am kind of coming around on Misa, although Martone's
Are
had a
you?
couple
Okay.
good games in the past couple weeks. I'm starting to get more of what Misa is, especially with how he gels
Yeah.
with like talent like Chernyshov's. It's yeah, I start to see a little bit more, and he's killing it. Like he, I don't know, if keeps going like this and starts to show even more, there's like it's not an unreal possibility that he could try to challenge for number one because
So
Schaefer hasn't played.
some hate for Shape.
No, not hate for Shape. I still like Shape. He just hasn't. He's not playing. So
He's not
you're
playing. Yes.
it's the eye candy. It's what you can see.
Right. Recency
And
bias.
yeah, it's recency bias. I'm watching Chernyshev play with Misa and going,
Yeah.
damn, that looks really good. um, but I like him a lot. I think it's a hell of a second round pick. I don't know really why he fell, other than he's Russian. I still don't know why he fell. Maybe there was injury concerns already known. I really don't
Yeah.
know. He was graded as a first round pick by most scouting services. So
Yeah, like he was. In fairness, though, he was one of those first round picks that there's always somebody that's got to drop out of the first round. He wasn't like a top 10 first round pick. He was
yes,
like
yes,
middle of
15
the
to
first
25
round to
somewhere.
later, right? And so
Yeah.
there's always a guy that kind of drops off. We're not sure why. Russian factor. He got sunburned, right, in Dan Milstein's camp. So who knows? He didn't get to show off his
Yep.
skills there. He's got sunburned in Florida.
Yeah, amazing.
But but which would be hilarious if that's why he fell
Yep.
and the Sharks got a future middle six winger or top six winger because of that. But okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just 5 games into the Chernyshev North American experience. Give me a ceiling right now that you think that you would kind of predict just based on the little stuff you've seen, small sample size, obviously
Yep.
extrapolate. Please don't say Mark Stone, or
Mark
I'm going to
Stone,
end this podcast.
100%. Yeah, he's 95% going to be Mark Stone. No, I like second line winger, second line scoring winger would be the ceiling, I think, and that's not a
More
bad
offensive trending though, like in that
I
sense
think
too.
so.
The Stone
Yeah,
comp
he's
is
not
obviously
bad
we're talking Stone is a
defensively.
Selke candidate, so
Yeah,
he's not going
exactly.
to be
He's
killing
not
penalties probably.
well, at least I mean for right now, I don't think that's like his main role, but he's a smart player, and oftentimes these kind of guys that have a lot of hockey IQ, they do end up on the penalty kill a lot because they can kind of guys like Celebrini and Granlund and those kind of guys that have a really good brain for the game. But no, I don't think it's like his main like bread and butter thing. But it's not like he's like Musty where I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's ever seeing the penalty kill. Like I don't think Quentin Musty's ever seeing a penalty kill in his life. Maybe and he's playing penalty kill right now, but you know what I mean.
Like in NHL though, right?
Exactly.
I
like
understand.
I don't see that role
There's a big
for
difference,
him. I think there's a possibility that Chernishov has at least an okay brain for defensive coverage that like I'm not going to rule it out entirely. So I it's only been 5 games, but man, that's a good pick. It's 14 points in 5 games. He just looks really confident. He looks kind of like a man amongst boys, even though he was playing mostly in juniors last year. Like he had some, but he's back in a junior league now. It just kind of looks like a man amongst boys, and it's A, because of his size, and B, just how he can manipulate so well and hold on to the puck. So. Yeah, I mean, last year he had 22 games, and so he actually played 34 games in the KHL as well last year. So not just MHL, but he had 22 games in the NHL. So he's taken it he plays a more mature game, I think, than a lot of the junior counterparts that he's up against. I like
Sorry, I keep turning my head, but I'm watching Brandon Svoboda, Sharks prospect. Yep. Hopefully winning this bet for Macklin Celebrini because he's got BU up 2-1 going into the third period.
Yeah. Oh my god, I got to turn this game on.
You got to put that on. You got to put that on. Yeah. Just have it on the side. So.
Brandon Svoboda scored? Oh, he did.
Yeah, he did.
1-1, and then 2-1.
2-1 B over BC. So.
The Gay Pro Ryan Leonard have one, or that line has a goal. Oh man, I got to put this game on. This has a lot of implications for the Sharks. I mean, James Higgins is still in that realm of possibilities.
Right? In the mix, yeah.
You know, Mike Greer loves his college hockey from Boston, so definite possibility. Oh, Higgins is playing with Stiga and Berard. He's not actually playing with Perreault and Leonard.
Yeah, Cole Hutson with his 8th goal this season too.
Yeah, he's had a great season.
He has a nice year, yeah.
Yeah. But I think Chernishov ceiling, second line winger would be the more offensive leaning. Not going to rule out that he couldn't play on a penalty kill, but he's also
one
not
more
cheating.
Put you on a spot question just for now. We're gonna do after the trade deadline, like we always do. We're gonna do kind of our top 10 prospects right after the deadline. And is Chernishov playing his way to challenging like a Musty like spot, like that caliber, that class of Shark prospect?
I think so. I think so.
There you go. Exciting.
It is. I think Musty was chosen higher in a deeper draft overall, so that kind of tells you something. Chernishov's going into a great situation right now, so it's kind of tough to tell. And there's a lot of recency bias, but he
Musty doesn't get to play with Michael Misa, maybe, right?
He looks more. I don't know. He looks more complete as a player. I would say.
Okay.
And more patient and more. I think there's just a little bit more runway there with him right now, as opposed to Musty that's got to like really hit that ceiling. I think to get into a lineup. I think
Musty's not scoring like 60 points for you. It sounds like maybe he's even like a 50-point guy, like a Barabanov or a Kevin LeBanc at his best. Obvious offensive talent, but they don't add enough elsewhere that they've got to be scoring a lot to be helping you, especially on a good team too. On a bad team, sure, you can get away with a bunch of guys like that, but on a good team, there's not as much need for a guy that can just pop in 50 points but can't add much else. If you can pop in like 70 or 80, then that's different. But in the lower end of that, yeah, not that useful for a winning team.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm more impressed than I thought I was going to be honest. I didn't. The bits I had seen of him before the draft, I was like, okay, he's got a lot of skill. He can make some good rush plays, but I didn't think it was as good as it's been so far. So
Dev camp wasn't really strong for him. I was definitely watching him there, and granted it was one scrimmage, but they did put him on. I think he was on Celebrini's line for Dev camp, but he didn't really pop for me there. But he might have been dealing with his injury. It's hard to say. It's one game. Who knows? So might have been still dealing with the after effects of sunburn.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and again, hopefully the rust like will come off of his legs, and then you'll really see what the feet can do, because it's not
right, especially in the playoffs too, right, against the better teams. Saginaw, I think, is they're on track to make the playoffs, right? So
yeah, so I think they were middle of the. Let me check again.
I thought, yeah, when he joined them, I saw, well, they're not like a top team, but they're
second in their division right now. So
okay. So yeah, that'd be good to see.
Yep, Sudbury's third in their division right now. I haven't watched much of Musty since he came back and everything, but I've still seen highlights, still doing Musty things. And I know that they said that he was playing penalty kill and such, but I'll take a look and see what has evolved with his game too. But yeah, early updates. Chernishov looks good.
So we've just heard in the last 20 minutes, Mark Stone and Celebrini brain, guys. So
no, that's not what I meant. He still makes a lot of mistakes. Like he still makes a lot of mistakes. And he rushes plays. Like he's trying a little too much, I think. But you could see where the steps are going, and then when it hits, you're like, that was really, really smart. That was a very good, the way that his processing speed happened there is.
Okay.
So it's Celebrini brain, Mark Stone compete level. Who else? Kucherov passing ability. He's got Ovechkin shot
with Kevin LeBanc production.
With Kevin LeBanc production, yeah. But yeah, it's. Currently cruising at 2.8 points per game, so I'm sure that'll stick throughout the whole season. It'll break records. Oh man, I'm gonna get killed for this.
No, we don't do that. We don't. Yeah, I'm not gonna pull that out of the podcast.
Yeah.
So.
Again, just want everybody to know.
We're keeping this podcast. So
I just picked a 6'3" right-hander who's smart and has a good shot, and thinks the game well. Oh man,
half of our listeners won't get the Mark Stone, and they're gonna skip to Colby Cohen, so I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, we'll just make a little cut here and
yeah.
All right, y'all.
That part's for the diehards. So when he does become Mark Stone, then you can run a victory lap and
hell yeah. When he's winning Stanley Cups as our grindy do everything first line winger. Yep.
Yeah. Our LTIR edition for the 2029 Stanley Cup winners.
I was watching, it was Vegas versus somebody, and I had watched Chernishov the night before, and then I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, like I not that they are the same player at all, but I just got the picture of like what a power forward like that can be.
It's fair. I mean, just style, right? Like, the first few times I started watching Celebrini, really gaining a picture in my head. Actually, who he reminded me more was of McKinnon, which we can kind of see now, just how he leads the rush, right? And on the power play, breaking into the zone. And at first I thought, man, I don't want to say that though, because like
people are going to kill me.
People are already tossing Crosby and Taves. I don't want to be like, oh yeah. And there's also McKinnon too.
Yep.
But as we've seen him more, I think that's not, and obviously we see as an 18-year-old what he's doing, that doesn't seem as far-fetched as it did, like, I think in preseason. That's what I was like, I see stylistically actually a little more like a like two-way McKinnon, which is ridiculous. It's like, I'm not going to say that out loud.
Yeah. It's player comps are always dumb. But everybody loves player comps. So everybody always wants a player comp. And It's
Yeah, so I guess then, stylistically, maybe there's with Celebrini, there's some McKinnon, but there's stylistically, but then we got to talk about actual NHL production, right? Yeah, and so I don't necessarily Celebrini doing what McKinnon can do, popping in 130, 140 points, but if he can be 100-point, a better Jonathan Taves or something like that, 100-point two-way center,
easy peasy.
You're golden, yeah.
And that's kind of like, that's why I've like compared guys like, even though Strome and Smith are different hands, different size, Will Smith is a better
that's right,
skater, but that was always
right.
Like
you have mentioned that one,
that was my comp, is like a very good, very, very good vision, lots of skill with the puck, great on the power play. But can maybe leave you wanting more in other areas of the ice. But Strom's doing great with Washington, point per game.
He is now. Yeah, that's true. Gotta give him credit for that.
Took a while.
I have not always been kind toward his game, but
yeah,
he's doing it.
Yeah. So it doesn't always have to be either hand or size too for comps. It's the way that they play the game. But anyway, that's it. I got nothing else. Do you got anything else, Sheng?
Yeah, no, I just speaking of Strome, it is interesting his course, because 24 years old, Chicago, they just kind of let him go. I think, was he on waivers once too, or am I wrong?
I don't know if he was,
maybe not on waivers, but he definitely was like trade, like kind of like, hey, this guy's available for not very much, with Chicago, but he was still pretty young with Chicago, and he signed with Washington as a 25-year-old. And sometimes it just takes that amount of time, right? And so,
I think Strome is one of the worst like actual skaters in the league. So that also is that's something that is not Will Smith. Will Smith's not one of the worst skaters in the league. He's just not up to like NHL average yet, but he's not the worst skater in the league. So that's kind of held him back a lot too.
Sort of like the point is that you learn to compensate, though, right? Where like you may be one of the worst skaters in the league, but obviously you score enough to make up for it. But also too, you understand the game better, so your skating doesn't hurt you as much defensively as it did when you're 18, or even when you were 23 in Chicago. So that's part of the thought there. So anyway, he's just an interesting case study in development, and I guess Arizona and Chicago had to give up on him because they couldn't give a guy like that, especially when you're trying to win games or whatever, top 6 time. But eventually, though, that a guy can figure it out.
Yeah, and it's always a good thing. And that's also why NHL top 5 picks get like a billion chances in the NHL, is because of this kind of thing. So say Will Smith only ever gets like up to a half point a game in San Jose for the next like 4 years for some reason. Like it doesn't matter where he goes unless he like is completely flamed out of the league for whatever reason. Like a team's going to keep taking chances on Will Smith until they're out of chances, essentially, because the skill level's there with guys like Smith and Strome and stuff,
And for good reason, though, is your point, though, because I think a lot of times there's criticism, like, oh, why are you giving this guy another chance? Like Puljujarvi is a guy that just obviously hit waivers, right? And he might be done. I'm not sure, but he lasted maybe a little longer than maybe he should have if he was the 44th pick or a 4th round pick. So
it's just because one of these guys will be like, some of them eventually will hit and they'll figure it out, and then it all kind of just sticks. So now we're just rambling. All right.
The third period just started for the bean pot, so
I gotta leave. I'm gonna get out of here.
You gotta leave. Yeah.
But I hope you guys all enjoy your week / your Four Nations Faceoff. We will be back next time with more Sharks.
We don't know what that is. It might be before the Sharks start play again, or not.
Or they make a huge trade and then we were back immediately.
Yes, emergency podcast for the
Noah Dobson
Luke Kunin for a 3rd round pick trade. Noah Dobson trade, sure.
Luke Kunin for Noah Dobson. Yep, heard it here first. That's the
one. Would you trade Will Smith for Noah Dobson? That is the value is more fair that way.
No, I wouldn't.
No? Okay.
No, I think his play is downturned enough, and I think you want to, before you make a fool of yourself, and then he becomes like 100-point player. You're like, shit.
Sure, fair. But I think about it though, because the
Yeah.
Sharks defense is their sore spot in the system, but also this season too. So if you believe in a Dobson, if you believe in the guy, I think hard about it.
Yeah, I think about it, but I think I'd say no. The downside, upside curves and stuff, I'd be like, I can't do it. Maybe you regret it later on, but yeah, it's a lot of risk trading a guy like Smith. But you're right,
Yeah,
that
there's
is
a lot of
probably
risk.
closer.
There's a lot of risk, yeah.
All right. Hope you all have a good week. Enjoy the Colby interview, and we will see you next time. Bye.
All right, we have a very special guest here, a friend of the show. Loved his appearance over the summer when he came in, hyping up Macklin, Celebrini, and Will Smith. Think he's been proven right. Anyway, we have Colby Cohen. He is ESPN's college hockey commentator. He is also on Daily Faceoff on the Morning Cuppa Hockey podcast. Welcome to the show, Colby.
It's always good when you get invited back for a second appearance. It means you did something right in the first appearance. So it's good to be back with you guys.
Well, you did right saying nice things about Macklin the first time, but now though you're saying maybe not so nice things. We're going to get to that in a second. But before we get there, though, I had to ask you though, how much did it pain you, like pain the bowels of your heart, to see Macklin Celebrini wearing a BC jersey?
Listen, a bet's a bet. BC won. I've been on the winning side of those bets in my life because I've had a couple, especially when it didn't look so good and BC was a better team. But it was certainly a sight to see Macklin Celebrini wearing a Will Smith Boston College Eagles jerseys. There's no doubt it pressed some buttons for sure.
And Mac and Will actually have another bet going on for the next Bean Pod. So we were going to ask you, what do you think it should be? What should their bet be going forward?
Well, look, it depends. Is it double or nothing? Is it? Well, I guess the first part of the bet's already been paid. I don't know. I don't like Macklin's chances in these bets right now. So he needs some favorable odds to even the potential score. Maybe if BU wins, Smith should have to buy Macklin a new car. If BC wins, maybe it's just buy him dinner. So something like that. But listen, I think it's really cool though to see these two players and the relationship that they've formed and sort of seeing them go through their first year together. I think I harped on that so much when I talked to you guys last about how impactful that could be to have two guys doing it together. Obviously for Macklin, it's all just clicked right away. I mean, he just walked into the NHL and was just one of the best players in the league from opening night this year. I know he got hurt and he had to wait to really see him, but you're just seeing he's not only as good as advertised, he's better than advertised. And the other, with Smith, now you're really starting to see what I got to see last year at BC and what the national team saw. I mean, you're starting to see his confidence build and you're just seeing the plays that he can make. And he hasn't been a dominant player night in and night out at the NHL level, but he makes certain plays that not everybody in the league can make. Most guys can't make. That's what you're starting to see with Will Smith. So, listen, I would be frustrated if I was Ryan Warsofsky because it sucks to lose, even if you're in a rebuild. But I would also feel a little sense of relief going to bed every night knowing I was going to have those two guys in my lineup for a very, very long time.
Yeah, like you said, he stepped right in, and it's kind of like been Macklin's team for a little while now. It feels like, at least it's transitioning into, I'd say. We wanted to bring you on the podcast this time to talk about the Calder Trophy race specifically, because it's kind of it was actually like it was Michkov off and running, gonna take it for everything, and then it's kind of changed into now a 3-horse race with Michkov.
That doesn't include Michkov.
So it's but we wanted to bring you on because 2 weeks ago you had Eric Engels of Sportsnet on your pod. He does a great job covering the Canadians, and you said that Lane Hutson had actually overtaken Macklin in the Calder race, and we wanted to pick your brain about it.
And those are fighting words for us.
Might be fighting.
Those are fighting words for us.
Listen,
The Calder
first
Cup
off-
is the Stanley Cup for the Sharks this year, or the
Yeah,
Calder
absolutely.
Trophy.
So yeah, what do you think about
you know,
Lane?
look, I think that when you you guys have me. I'm not frozen or anything, am I?
No.
Should be
You
good.
guys hear me,
have to
right?
keep muted
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
myself.
I'm
Do
just
you
making
guys want to
sure.
restart that, or are you? Are you
Yeah,
okay?
no problem. So here's what I would say.
Okay.
So what I would say here is like you have two players that are kind of going back and forth right now, night in and night out. I think Lane had a little stretch where he was really dominant and he got on a really good little heater. He was putting up a lot of points, but he was dominating games. And that's what Macklin has done for most of the season. During that little stretch of time, I think Macklin was not producing maybe quite at the same level. And I think I had just seen Montreal kind of a number of times. Look, if you ask me right now, here, fill out your ballot for the Calder Trophy, Macklin Celebrini would be number one, and Lane Hutson and Lane Hutson would be number two. But it's not over. Like these two are going to continue to go back and forth, and they're going to continue to push each other. You can't ignore what Lane is doing. You can't. And look, I always go back to the fact that Macklin's contributions are just so good in all three zones. Like I have a hard time finding there's not many guys in the NHL that are that good in all three zones, let alone rookies. I mean, he just is the best player a lot of nights in all three zones. And Lane Hutson has been sort of finding his way and figuring out how to do it without the puck. And I think he's gotten better and better defensively. But I think just like at BU, like you could have had those guys as 1-2 or 1-2-3 for the Hobie last year. Like these are two guys that pushed each other at BU. They're great friends. Now they're pushing each other in the NHL. I think Lane Hutson has probably some more talent, established talent around him to work with in Montreal. But I think that it would be unfair to not at least point out that Lane is nipping at Macklin's heels. Like there's no doubt in my mind that he's not making this a little bit of a closer race than it would have been, let's say 4 or 5 weeks ago, when it just was like, there's just nobody close doing what Macklin is doing. Look, you're like asking me to pick between two of my kids. Which kid do you love more? With Macklin and Lane. But, at the time when we had Eric Engels on, it was off of, I think, a 2 or 3 point night for Lane. He had been on like a 6 or 7 game point streak. He is starting to creep up on a lot of records for rookie defensemen in Montreal, which is pretty impressive when you think about the history of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
No disrespect, it's not the same as the history of the San Jose Sharks. I mean, you guys know, I there's a lot of people near and dear to my heart that make decisions in San Jose. And so boy, do I want those decisions to be made well. And boy, do I root for those guys. So I just think that right now you have two rookies that are playing at a little bit of a different level than everybody else is really what it comes down to. And I think that you would be doing a disservice to Lane to say that it isn't a 2-horse race, right? And people in Calgary will argue it's a 3-horse race. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't watch the Calgary Flames. I rarely watch them. So I can't sit on here and give you reasons why I think Dustin Wolf should be Calder. They're just a team that, I'll be honest, the first half of the season I've neglected. I need to watch them more. I will watch them more. But I have a lot more San Jose viewings and a lot more Montreal viewings. And so I'm really comfortable with what I've seen out of Macklin and what I've seen out of Lane. But Macklin is like, I would buy a ticket to go watch either player play. I really would. And I know you guys are San Jose focused. He like, this kid has walked into the league and what he's just, the maturity in his game has been, it's fun to watch. Like he's just so valuable everywhere on the ice. He's a player you can build your team around. Can you build your team around Lane? Lane would be a really good piece on a really good team, but you build a whole franchise around Macklin Celebrini, and those players just don't come around that often.
Well, I thought we were going to have a debate, but Colby, you've locked in your third appearance to the show in the future. Congratulations. Good job.
Listen, I'm always appreciative.
No, but you're right though that Lane Hutson absolutely deserves. It's a 2-horse race. It's really a 3-horse race. I haven't watched a lot of Dustin Wolf myself, but they've come into San Jose, and I want to speak briefly for Dustin before we go back to the Lane and Max show. But Dustin Wolf is 6th in the league in goals saved above expected. I mean, that's a guy that might be carrying the Flames to the playoffs kind of on his back there. That's pretty good for a rookie goalie. So by the end of the season, it might really be between those three. But going back to Lane, Lane, to kind of make his argument briefly, if you guys aren't aware, Sharks fans, Lane Hutson has 41 points. He leads all rookies in points. He's a defenseman, so that's very, very impressive. And he also plays over 22 minutes a night, I believe. He's a big power play guy. I think, I thought, like I said, I thought we were going to have more of a debate. Kind of the debate part of it, those are kind of Lane Hutson's kind of boxcar stats, very, very impressive. But I think when I like to hear what you think about this, when I kind of compare Macklin Celebrini and Lane Hutson, though, in terms of just usage, in terms of I know that especially with the Sharks trading Mikael Granlund, that now Macklin Celebrini is the clear-cut number 1 player on the Sharks. Like, there's no debate anymore. I think when Granlund was there, Granlund still had sort of the veteran polish or whatever, right? So you can make a 1-2 case there, but now it's clearly Celebrini. And teams are, even earlier in the season, teams were hard matching against Macklin Celebrini. When they were in Tampa sent Anthony Cirelli, their Selke candidate.
What does that
they
tell?
used
What does that? I mean, like,
yeah.
What does that tell you, right? You're sending a guy who just made Team Canada to go shut down Austin Matthews or Jack Eichel, is the same guy John Cooper is sending out to defend barely 18-year-old Macklin
Right.
Celebrini. Like, what a high honor. I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't see that game. I mean, that is as big of a compliment you can get from the guy who's probably considered the best coach in the National Hockey League, in John Cooper. Like, that is a huge compliment, silent compliment, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was a game where Granlund was there. So he had a choice of hard matching Cirelli on Granlund or on Celebrini. He chose Celebrini. And now there's not that choice anymore. And so I think with Hutson does get, I looked at some of the offensive zone he gets more of the favorable zone starts. He doesn't play the penalty kill, which was for me a big thing for Brock Faber last year, that Brock Faber was an all situations guy. So that's why I gave Brock Faber my Calder vote over Connor Bedard. And so it's not any sort of homerism or whatever. Lane Hutson has a great case. But I think that for a defenseman, what would really impress me is and beyond his already really impressive offensive resume, but if he is doing some of the kind of the heavy lifting defensively, which is very, that's like the really catches your eye when a defenseman is doing that. Whereas I would say with Macklin is doing some of the defensive sort of, he's getting the hard matchups. He's not getting as favorable offensive zone starts.
Well, look, you're going to the next layer. And look, like, when we pick the Norris Trophy every year, we usually pick the defenseman with the most points.
Right.
It's kind of, I got crucified last year for saying that that Brock Faber should have been the Calder Trophy. When you look at the way he was playing and against whom, and the matchups he was drawing, and he was still producing while being a premier shutdown defenseman, I thought the same thing you thought last year. I thought Faber should not have been this foregone conclusion that Connor Bedard was the Calder. Like, and it was, unfortunately, it just was, right? I'm a huge Brock Faber fan. And so I think you make a good argument, but I'm going to just counter argument a little bit here in Lane Hutson's behalf. When you watch the Montreal Canadiens and you watch how often he has the puck, it's pretty remarkable. And you watch how he actually, and Macklin does this too. So we're not, it's both can be true, but at Lane Hutson's position, he creates so much time and space for everybody else because of his poise with the puck, right? I mean, he's one or two steps ahead and his vision is just on another level. And, it's funny with Macklin, he almost creates for himself probably more than Lane does, where I think Lane creates for other people at a level that very few in the National Hockey League match. Like Lane he creates so much space for his partner and for his wingers and the centers with the plays and the passes and his ability to suck you in and move it, where Macklin is more just like this, he's almost like a bull. He's like, I'll just run right through you and make this play. I mean, how many times do you feel like Macklin is either run out of options or he's run into too much traffic? Well, he comes through with the puck and then he makes a pass that you're like, how the did he see that guy? I mean, he just does things and you're like, wait, what? I thought that was going to be a turnover in the neutral zone, but somehow 71 still has the puck on his stick. So they're really different in the way that they create, but boy, they're both just so effective. Like I said, if you said to me, Colby, you got to pick one and build your team around them, it's 71, right?
Yeah.
But I sure would do everything I could to trade up and have both of them on my team. I love to go 1-2 in my draft and have a Sedin-like situation where I get back-to-back picks and, I can build my team around both of those players for the long haul.
The Sharks had a chance too. They passed on Lane in the second round in the 2022 draft. Not going to bring that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, they passed on him technically 3 times, right? They had the late first, then 2 seconds, both also not going. And they also chose
I think there's
a smaller defenseman as well, and they just chose, didn't choose Lane, and that was kind of a lot of teams didn't, obviously. But
yeah, that's true.
Sharks
every team skipped Lane at least once. Everybody skipped Lane at least once. He was 62nd overall.
Yeah. What I want to bring up about Lane is, and again, I'm a Sharks fan first, so clearly Macklin Celebrini is my Calder vote. But Lane is, you're right, he's approaching levels of defensive production from a rookie that are historic, honestly. He's in the last 30 years, he's already top 15 in rookie D-man scoring, and he's got a real shot to go number 1, which was Quinn Hughes with 56 points in 73 games. So now that is limited because Cale Makar had 50 points in 57 games, and I think Makar is like another level of defenseman, but
he's different. He's not in. You can't exactly. Put Makar in the category. Even with Makar, probably is the great. Like he probably goes down as the best guy who ever played that position. Probably. Yeah. So like.
But he does have a chance to at least get the most points in the last 30 years.
And I think he'll do it. I think Lane will do it. He continues to produce. He continues to find a way to be on the score sheet. And what's funny, like with Lane, he'll get a lot of second assists. You watch the second assist that he gets. He's like a conductor out there. He's giving it to a guy, and then that guy's only option is to give it to the goal scorer. Like he's putting the primary assist passer in such a good situation that's an easy play to make. And I'll tell you what, when it comes to Macklin, who's had some secondary assists, very similar. Like sometimes you could say, oh, well, it's a secondary assist. It was a chip or it was something or other. Like these guys are conductors, right? They put you in such a good fortuitous spot that your only option is to then move it to the guy who's wide open for the goal. And these are NHL players. They're going to hit those types of reads. So they both have an uncanny ability to find those second assists, but the quality of both of their second assists, if you were to go back and watch all the goals they figure in on, they're not nothing assists. Like they're not nothing plays. They're well-directed plays that are always starting with one of those two.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually speak more to Lane Hutson. Maybe this is part of the reason why he dropped in the draft, but when I watched him in Tuesday's San Jose Montreal game, like he doesn't look to the eye to be like the quickest, fastest player, but what he does is that he is so uncanny with his patience and his puck poise that he just kind of sucks in the forechecker. And by the time the forechecker knows what he's doing, Lane has passed him down the wall and has already made his pass into the slot or whatever he's doing. He did that to Luke Kunin in that game. But one of the stats that I saw actually that speaks to exactly what you're saying, like you are totally not overhyping Lane. Like Lane offensive zone possession for defensemen. I look at a stat. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Stat Leaks. Stat Leaks. That's a Megan Chaika's company. Anyway, I have access to their stats, and for offensive zone possession for defensemen, okay, Quinn Hughes is on another level. So he is just like he's in his own category in terms of just how much he holds the puck 5-on-5 in the OZ. But the next level below with your Adam Foxes, your Cale Makar is very, very, tremendous defenseman. Lane Hutson is right there as a 20-year-old rookie, just holding on to the puck, just having a puck on his string in the OZ. And so I just wanted to put that out there, just so again, what you're seeing out there, it's backed up by the stats. Finally, I did want to mention too. I think we might be ending the Lane Macklin hype train to talk a little bit more to move on in topics, but I think I did want to mention a passing mention on Michkov, and Michkov. He has, I do see he scored 2 goals recently, but he has slumped tremendously, right? And he is one of those guys that if he's not scoring, I don't know if he's helping you that much, unlike maybe, yeah. And so unlike say a Celebrini. And so that's a guy that we didn't forget to mention him, but until he starts to, he's the guy that's got to pile up the points to get back into the Calder race.
And one of those goals that Michkov scored the other night was just like, I don't think I've ever seen that level of cherry picking in an NHL game in a very long time. Like it was so bad. And like, I love Michkov. I've watched Michkov so much since this draft year. He's a tremendous offensive player, and he has a great, like his hockey IQ for getting a rush going is fantastic. But the way he plays, honestly, like it's streaky, and also it's can be super ineffective. Like if that puck bounces a different way, Michkov is like in the neutral zone while Washington's scoring a goal.
Well, that's what benched him in the Islanders game. Yeah, because he was cherry picking when he should have been covering his guys.
Exactly. He was way off like his man.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of nailed it on the head. If he's not producing, what's he doing? Where Macklin, Macklin can just affect the game in all 3 zones with Michkov. Top of the circle's in, power play up, 3-on-3. He looks really good. 5-on-5 in his own zone in the neutral zone. I think he struggles a little bit. I think the difference between these guys is that you could build a perennial powerhouse around Macklin Celebrini. You're not building your team around Matvei Michkov. He's a piece. If you have him as one of your wingers on your top couple of lines, it's a good thing, but you're not building your whole team around him like you would a Macklin Celebrini. And listen, the Macklin Celebrini types don't come around. More guys are like Michkov and Will Smith even than they are Macklin Celebrini, right? Guys who can be really, really good top 6 NHL forwards, but they're not a franchise center. They're not going to be your captain for 12 or 15 years. They're not going to bring you back from the grave, basically, which is what I think Macklin will do for the San Jose franchise. So I don't think these players have ever been in the same category. I don't think they've ever been in the same class. I think the more fair comparison would be Smith and Michkov. I think it's probably more the fair comparison. Now you're talking about the 5th overall pick, the 4th overall pick, I think, right? So I think that's more of a fair comparison. I think trying to compare any rookie to Celebrini is unfair. I just do. I don't even think Bedard is the same level. I don't think Bedard is nearly as good or valuable. And I'll tell you right now, last year at the Frozen Four, we told that to some people that worked in Chicago, Butchie and I, and they were not having it, and they did not want to hear it. And I said, I'm just telling you, like, you've got a centerman who, you're going to see. It's just he's a different level, and there's a different maturity to this kid's game. And, oh, wait, he's going to probably get better and a lot better. And that's kind of the scary thing for anybody who's going to have to play against Celebrini for the rest of his career.
And I want to point out too that you said basically the same thing on a podcast over the summer. So this isn't revisionist. I know that it's been popular over the last few months to kind of revisit the Bedard versus Celebrini argument, which was not an argument for most people over the summer. But over the
No,
summer,
people
you're
said I
already
was
saying that you
crazy.
thought that Bedard was better at the wing, and we've kind of seen that.
Yeah.
And little things like that clip that that Paul Bissonnette did on Bedard that went viral. Paul was right. I mean, that's not good
Yeah.
hockey by and I know Connor Bedard is just a teenager, also to Michkov and even Lane Hutson just 20. So
Yeah, but
these guys can all learn and get a lot better, but you're never gonna see Biz do a
yeah.
clip on Celebrini's play like that.
No, Celebrini is a dog. Like he's the coach's dream. He's like a human clip reel, like just because of his effort. I mean, I told you, like I watch him every game at BU, and like he doesn't stop. His motor it's insane. It's fun to watch, but I'm glad you brought all that up because like people have been like crucifying me for saying that. I said it last year. I said it this summer. This was before Macklin ever played a game in the National Hockey League. Like I really felt this way watching these two players play, and it's so far, yeah, that's how it looks.
I think our last little mini topic is Will Smith because he's had a little bit of a resurgence, I'd say. There was a period in the December-ish timeframe where Will Smith wasn't playing his best hockey. He had a pretty big cold streak at that point, and now
in October too to start the season.
And and also there was talk.
But I don't think resurgence is a fair way to look. I don't think resurgence is a fair way to look at it. I just think he's a little more of a normal rookie. Like he's trying to figure out, okay, like in the NHL, everything happens, between the faceoff circles, right? Like you're not beating goaltenders from the spots. Your defensemen are sealing you way harder. Like so many more goals happen right on the blue paint. It's just a much heavier, more physical league. And, the really good players figure it out. I told you guys this past summer when we talked, we did the article or whatever, like I thought Will Smith had such a smart hockey brain that he'd figure it out quicker. And I was wrong. It's taken him a little bit more time. It's taken him half of a season. But I do feel like you're starting to see over the last number of weeks what made him the draft pick that he was. You're starting to see the IQ, his ability to make plays in the neutral zone under pressure. He's starting to get to the areas where you actually score goals in the National Hockey League. And Ryan Warsofsky's putting him on the ice more. He's playing almost 18 minutes in the recent games, which, 18 minutes versus 15 minutes, like that's like 2 extra shifts a period, right? Like an additional 3.5 minutes. If you're taking 40-second shifts, like that's 6 shifts. That's a good amount of ice time extra. It might not seem like a lot, but that's a lot for a player, right? And this is a guy who was playing 22, 23 minutes a night last year as a forward. So I think that you're starting to see him kind of come along. I thought it would be a little quicker because I thought he was smart enough to figure out, all right, if I don't score, like here's how I can help the team. And that wasn't necessarily the case for him, but I do think you're starting to get the glimpse of his offensive ability, because like he wasn't a bad player defensively last year. He wasn't. He was smart defensively because of his hockey IQ, because of his skating, because of his stick. So I'm happy to see him starting to really come along. And it sounds like you and I were on the same page with this. Like against Montreal the other night, I thought he was the best of the 3 rookies. The Celebrini, the Hutson, and Smith. I got to go with the BC guy and say he was the best one of the 3 that night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought that of the 3, he was definitely the best offensive player. I think Will on the defensive side, he's still trying to figure that out. If we talk about the Smith, I think Michkov, you said that's a more fair comparison. And Michkov, in my mind, is the more physical, stronger player. So he was able to kind of do that early on. And Smith doesn't have that physicality yet. And so Smith really had to kind of learn to kind of process the game and get by without that physicality. And with Smith, when that physicality comes, he gets stronger, like 10 pounds stronger. He gets a little bit quicker. then you're going to really see that intelligence kind of take over. But it's nice to see, though, that it has been taking over, even though he is still limited physically out there.
Well, and I think the other thing too, like, how many times have you seen a rookie come into the NHL and do really, really well early, and then the second year they like kind of go downhill a little bit? I think for Smith, it might be a blessing because, you know, he didn't have this, like, Celebrini has just been like this, right? Like, how many speed bumps has he really hit? Not many. I mean, just because of the way he plays, like, yeah, he might go a couple of games without a point, but like, even with that, he's still affecting the game playing 21 minutes. So with Smith, like, maybe not lighting it up this year is a blessing for next year. I think that, you know, he's going to really have to like look in the mirror this summer and realize, okay, these are the keys to me getting to 75 points next year or something like that in year 2. And the strength and just working on, you know, being able to win battles offensively below the tops of the circles. I think the Michkov point you made was really well stated. Michkov has played pro hockey for a couple of years in Russia. He's played against guys that play with that type of ability where, you know, Smith didn't have to worry about any of that at the college level, right? He was just so much better than everyone else. So it's going to continue to come. I think Smith will probably have his ups and downs the rest of the year. Ryan Warsofsky, you know, I had his brother Dave on our show the other day, actually.
Did you really?
You know,
Okay.
Dave, you know, he played in the National Hockey League.
Yeah. Just
50
retired.
to 100 games, something like that, just retired. But, you know, I know Ryan really sees a high ceiling for Will Smith. You know, like I think that there's no worries about what and who Will Smith is going to be for this franchise long term. I think you know, Mike Grier would echo that sentiment as well. Like, I think these guys are really happy with progress. They're really happy with his work ethic. I mean, the kid always wants to be on the ice. He always wants to be practicing. They probably have to tell these kids sometimes you're not allowed to go on the ice between him and
they
Celebrini.
Just did that, actually,
it just cracks me up. Every time I talk to Ryan, he'll make a joke about that stuff with me. But, you know, look, give him credit too. Like, I think Mike Grier should be up for GM of the year. The moves that he's made. I mean, like, I think the Askarov move, are you kidding me? Like, you got a franchise goaltender in this kid. Barry Trotz, swing and a miss, pal. Like, you should have hung on to that kid for dear life. And look, there's a reason to stay up late and watch San Jose, win or lose. Like, I really believe that Mike Grier and Ryan Warsofsky, the way they've managed these young guys, the way they've managed the trades of some of the veterans, like with Askarov. I mean, Mike Grier should be general manager of the year. In my opinion, what he's done, it's like a clinic. I texted him the other day after, what was it, the Granlund trade? And I texted him, I said, geez, you're good at this whole GM thing, huh? And in true form, you know, Griersy didn't want to talk about himself at all. Like, I'm trying to give him compliments. He's asking me how my kids are. He doesn't want any credit. He doesn't want, like, Mike Grier is probably the most humble, like, general manager in the game of hockey. I just, like, be hard pressed to find somebody more humble than Mike Grier. He really is just one of a kind. And I'm like, geez, Griersy, I wish I know you must have learned this all from when we were workout partners at Mike Boyle for all those years, you know, but
I also think Grier should get a little bit of credit too for bringing Smith out of college, right? Like, A, because he avoided any kind of Cutter Gauthier, I'm unhappy kind of situation, and B, because he had the confidence and will to stick him on the team and say, you're going to figure it out. And I think that comes from, you know, Grier being a player and understanding the skill levels of players that he played with and seeing it in Smith. Like, it's not nothing to be like, I'm going to put him through some rough patches in the beginning of the league, and then he's turning into a better player every night. So I think it's a little bit of credit for that too.
Yeah. So exciting times. Like, if you're a San Jose fan, losing sucks, but there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. I mean, like, you know, I love the Chicago Blackhawks general manager, Kyle Davidson, but like, I'm more enthused about my rebuild if I'm San Jose than I am Chicago as it stands right now, because Macklin, Celebrini, because Askarov, like, the two hardest positions in the world to find a number one franchise changing center and a number one franchise changing goaltender. You got both of them on young in their career, cost-controlled contracts, caps going up. I mean, lots of excitement in San Jose.
I actually didn't like the Mikhail Granlund trade, but that's another topic. So,
well, listen, that's your job is to tell the GM what he's not doing right. That's what writers do. Come on.
That is her job.
That's your job. What do you mean? That's, of course, you got to tell Greersy that. Did you tell him? He'd probably laugh if you told him.
I wrote it, so yeah. So he read it. So
he watches the show. So he watched
Good.
our podcast.
Good. I don't know if he watches
glad.
the show, but definitely
Hey,
like
listen.
I made it very well known. I just yeah, we could talk about some other time. We don't get into it. So I got a lot of flack for it. I wasn't on the train for that. I believe that leadership, that Granny is a specific kind of leader that was good for the Sharks team, but that's a whole nother topic. So we'll let it go. So
listen, I think they maybe just feel so confident that they're already ready to turn it over to Macklin. I mean, that's entirely possible. And I guarantee you they had that conversation. Are we ready? Like, are we ready to take the training wheels off of Macklin? Maybe the little bit of training wheels they had left on him. And I bet you they had that conversation because, listen, there's one thing I would never question Mike Grier on, and you question him on everything. That's your job. But when it comes to him, I'll question a hockey decision. I'll never question a leadership decision because there's not a lot of better leaders in this world that I've ever been around than Mike Grier. So if he felt from a leadership standpoint, this was okay, that's one area where I will put my blind faith and trust in Mike Grier. And it's really not blind because I've been around him so frequently in my life, and I got to be around him even when he was still a player. And so I definitely, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt on that every day, that he 100% knows what he's doing, like unwavering benefit of, doubt.
Okay. Well, that's a fair point. So yeah, so Macklin Celebrini captain next year. So
maybe,
right.
Listen, we're not in the locker room every day. But it sounds like, he's one of these, like, he leads. Tell me, guys, does anybody lead by example more than him? He might not lead vocally, but lead by example. Anybody more than him?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is. I mean, I've seen him kind of take up for his coaches and press conferences, and actually that going back, yeah, gotta let you go. I know your time is up, but that does remind me when they introduced David Quinn, and actually I asked David Quinn about sort of his track record in New York and his reputation for not handling young players. I was just going off of what other people said, as like, what do you think of this reputation that has preceded you? And Mike spoke up for Quinny right there a couple of years ago. So yeah, so I can see what you're saying there, that there's a little bit of that locker room guy still in Mike for sure.
Absolutely. Well, look, thanks for having me today, guys. I appreciate it. Any chance to come and gush about Macklin and gush about Will Smith, even, like, I loved watching these kids play college hockey. I love watching them play in the NHL. I still think Macklin was snubbed from Team Canada, in my opinion. I think that they made a decision that because Bedard couldn't make it, they weren't going to take Macklin. I think that would have been just a bad look for Hockey Canada because Macklin came through the NCAA. I personally believe that's something that I don't know, maybe not, but I just can't see how having Macklin there instead of Seth Jarvis, like, to me, I don't see it. I think Macklin was left off that team, and I think that's a mistake because I think he plays a nice role in the Olympics in next year for Team Canada, but we'll see. I've been right before, I've been wrong before, so we'll see. It's a flip of the coin, I guess.
We'll have to have you back on after the Calder Trophy vote for sure.
Anytime. I know it was hard to link up schedule-wise, but we made it happen.
No, we did. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. No, we got to see another week of good Will Smith tape too to get that in there too. So,
yep, perfect. All right, thanks,
all right,
Colby.
guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, Colby.
See you guys. All right, anytime.